Mouse. I'm so silly. I wanna redeem your message since we didn't get to hear it because we still have to set it up on that screen. Wait, is it, where is it? I thought it was 500. Oh, there it is. There it is.
Hi, I'm Justin, and Mouse is my favorite Pokemon.
Aw, that was so cute. Pokemon. Okay, let's get my display up. Yay, there's Mouse. I'm gonna color Mouse. And I'm also gonna color something gay that I posted in the art channel. How do I show you this? Zoey and Nubia. And I might color my Scream comic that I was working on. Yeah, I got a tablet. I always have this tablet up for our stream, silly. Wow, Scooper nose. Meow. What else was I? Oh yeah, I'll probably work on some doodles. I want to find where to. Oh, I forgot to play the coloring song. I always play the coloring song instead of our regular. Oh, let me find it. It's Scoopy's tablet.
First you take the pink, and then some blue, and then the green, and then more pink, and then a dash of blue. Coloring, coloring, coloring. Do another color. Do, do, do. Look, I drew us. Bus driver, are we there yet?
Also, woof, I have 28 requests. I might need to I guess you can make redeems disabled. I might need to do that. I'm so sorry. It's just until I can catch up on everything. It might take 2 or 3 streams, but I'm looking forward to catching up on everything I got. I just I don't want to get too far behind. Oh, slurp. Meow. Stretch. And also, I wanted to listen to System Speak podcast. I love Mouse. I'm excited to color Mouse. I was really looking forward to this. Oh yeah, this is gonna be a PNG tuber. So Mouse can watch Sonic. But Mouse doesn't talk, so Mouse's character doesn't have a mouth. So it'll just be like a blinking that I gotta do, which will be really easy. Where is the podcast? Okay, this is the one we were on in our own listenings. We've been listening more to the podcast since Demon Turf Tower came out. As you may or may not have seen with our recordings, we're listening to System Speak through most of those recordings.
Okay, now open my box because I'm really excited.
Do you want me to open the package or the box first?
Well, will John Mark be okay if you open the package?
John Mark will be okay, whatever. You know what? Poor John Mark. I feel really bad for him right now. I feel like therapy has somehow... He's the one who's struggling from therapy today. I know that. And I feel like he has...
People are being noisy.
He's kind of in the middle between some things. And kind of like an overlapping center for some things that we're working on. And I feel like he just so wants everyone to be okay and to take care of them. And I think it's just a lot of pressure for him.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like...
Oh, I think you.
He is dealing with... Like, okay, if I were just... I don't
should
know
make
this,
like
so
a video
if I'm misspeaking
showing
or
all of our
being intrusive, then I'm
PNG
sorry.
troopers.
But I feel like if I were putting it into words, what I am feeling from him, especially after therapy today, I feel like there's like some kind of like grief, I don't know a better word for it, of like he was supposed to protect us and wasn't able to.
It's survivor's guilt.
Does that make sense?
Yes. What you're describing sounds like survivor's guilt. Like he feels guilty that he tried, but he couldn't.
Ugh. It's heartbreaking.
Well, will you make him I sent you certificates a couple weeks ago. Will you make him a certificate from me and send him some love?
Oh.
And tell him he's the bravest boy I know?
I am going to open the envelope.
Yes, and that's for him and John.
Oh my goodness, no way. No way.
Yes.
Okay, I can't. Okay, so I have to say what it is because they're listening, they're not watching. It's a paint by numbers kit of a picture of some puppies.
Puppy.
Right.
And I can't tell you how cool that is. Today is actually like the anniversary of us finding our therapist. And so Katie painted a picture that we gave to the therapist today for our therapy anniversary.
I
think they're calling it our therapy birthday.
Therapy
That's
birthday.
okay. It's still a celebration.
Well, and so like he was trying to take care of that and fix that, and we didn't have money to like put it in a frame or anything. So there was all this drama about him trying to take care of it. I don't know what happened once he finally got there and did it however he wanted or whatever, but I know like he was gonna be delivering it because they're super tight. He and the therapist are super tight. And so he was gonna be delivering it, but like he himself totally cannot paint and was talking about that before we went. And so like he's delivering something Katie painted and she knows that and he knows that, and the therapist is totally cool about that and gets it. Like there's no drama there at all. But he was talking this week, like this whole week, about how he's just not good at painting. He can't paint, but he could totally do this.
He and John can totally do it, and I got him puppies because every good boy deserves a puppy. And this way, he and John can have puppies, and it won't affect anybody, and they can be his, and he can name them, and he can hang them in your room.
Aww.
Because he talks about when he goes to the park how he likes to see the puppies, the boys do, and so that's why I got him puppies.
That's so sweet. Julie, that was so kind. That was so thoughtful.
Well, I hope they have fun with it. I think it'll be great. That's my hope.
Okay, there's a box, and it's so taped. I don't know if I can get in it.
Yes, I taped it. Miss Cruz let me have it. She gave me the tape, and I'm like, I'm making sure this stays closed because I don't want you looking through this, lady, because I'm sending contraband.
You're so funny. Contraband. I'm a fan of contraband.
I know, so am I, so that's why you got it.
Oh my goodness.
Oh.
That was so hard to pull off. I hit my hand on the window. If I break my car trying to get into your package. What is this? It says No Worries, an activity book for young people who sometimes feel anxious or stressed.
Yes. So I got that for the littles or for the outside kids. And I figured you could use it accordingly, but it's super cute and it may help. But it's age appropriate.
Wow, that's so cool.
It looks kind of cool, right? I almost thought, well, geez, I might
Also,
get one of these for me.
thinking about doing something like
That's super cool. We'll
But I'm
work
not
on that
sure.
and talk about it.
Yeah, let Dr. E look through it and make sure I don't go messing up somebody, okay? Because I don't want to have that on my heart. I was like, this is too good not to send.
Bunch balloons. Water balloons? You sent me water
I
balloons?
feel like this fits more.
Yes, and listen,
This-
hook them up
this
to the hose.
stay-
They all blow up at one time, and then you can throw them at
I'm
the
glad
kids.
you like the
That's
Or
amazing!
maybe
So these balloons hook up to the water hose. They have this attachment on the end of it, and it blows up 100 water balloons in 60 seconds.
Yes, girlfriend.
100 water balloons. in
That's
60 seconds.
amazing!
I buy them in stockpiles because when spring and summer hit and it's a warm day, I will fill up coolers with the balloons and I will set them around the backyard and I will have water balloon fights with my children and neighborhood kids.
Oh, Bubbles!
Yes, I thought that would be good for at the park for the little.
We are a fan of parks and bubbles. A lamb dress-up kit. Easter
Oh,
crafts.
yes. Okay, so look, you'll notice there's 25. So I figured if desperate times call for desperate measures, you could give some to outside kids to keep them busy, and inside kids will have an art project too, and then you can hang them on your door as a decoration
that.
for spring.
That is a lot of love, Julie. A lot of love.
Well, I was trying to make sure I took care of everybody.
What is this? Oh my goodness! You sent salsa!
That was for John Mark. He needed it. I told you to get tortilla chips before you opened my box.
You sent us salsa in the mail! That is contraband.
I know. I did it though, but it's canned. It's jarred, so we're good.
Chunky salsa mild. That is perfect. I'm so excited. We will probably eat this on the way home. I'm not even kidding.
And I'm okay with that. I just couldn't send chips because it would take up too much spot in my box.
Hey, baby.
Yeah.
And I had other things I had to send because I have to take care of a lot of people. I have a lot of friends in
Keep
there.
going back and forth with the
Oh,
eyes.
that's so kind. Oh, Easter stickers. Oh my goodness. Our 4-year-old, she has got a thing for bunnies. And these are all bunny stickers and butterflies. That's so cool.
Yes, I was looking out for my sticker friend.
Okay. Oh my goodness, there's more. Paintbrushes. You sent a little sign that says now time is safe.
Yes.
That
But you
is
can
gonna
put
make
our-
me cry.
And I wrote it for you too. I wrote it myself. And that was done in chalk pen. So if there's something else that you need to change it to, you can wipe that off. And I put the chalk pen in the box and you can change it to something else.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
But I did that for you because I
Ooh,
saw that and
shiny
it was like
eyes as
they need
like
a
a-
reminder on their desk.
A state.
That is so special.
That might be good.
Okay.
So yes, I did make that for you. That's my craftiness.
Oh, and you sent cards for everybody. I'm just gonna open mine.
Okay. I sent it for most everybody, but my hand got tired. And I bought a 10-pack, but I was running out.
Oh, you're so sweet. That's really sweet. It's so nice to have a friend. What? You sent some bling.
I want you to sparkle while you're doing your presentations.
Oh my goodness. That's so fancy.
You're going to be looking good.
Oh. I don't even know what to say.
My only concern is that I didn't want it to affect your cochlear implants, so I don't know if it will. I don't think it will.
No, not at all. We totally can wear earrings.
But I know somebody doesn't like jewelry, so I'm really sorry to them, but it had to be done.
Oh. Well, I'm sure John Mark doesn't like jewelry, and we're just not confident, like girly girl confident, or like styled girl. Right now, I am in overalls. Clearly, John Mark got dressed for today because I'm in overalls. But for the presentation, I mean, we wear decent clothes.
Exactly. So I figured I would give you spring jewelry so that you can look springy.
You've been a very kind friend, and I appreciate you being our friend.
I know, but listen, hey, you got my pictures, right? Because I took a whole bunch of pictures of my awesome park for you.
Yes.
And so, like, if you ever come to see me, we are so totally going there because we have awesome tree climbing there. Nice. And we're going to totally break the law and climb them. I have decided we're going to do all things fun, and we're not going to care what our issues are. We're just going to do them, and we'll just be ride or dies.
We need to find something near where you live for Dr. E to speak at, and then we can come.
Oh, I will look. I will make an appointment. I will look, I have, and I could set up my own conference. Okay? And we'll title it Trauma Informed Care.
Wow, you're so funny.
With keynote and guest speaker and presenter, Dr. E.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
Baby, chewing my pen.
Thank you for talking to me. Thank you for help me refocus after therapy, and for sending me pictures of the park and all the things. You were so supportive this week.
And that's what good friends do. They take care of their friends when their friends need them. Yes, and you have that number. Let's not give that out on the podcast, okay?
Right? Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yeah, let's not do that. I think you told me that we get fan mail, you and I.
Yes. Oh, we should read it.
Oh, okay. Is it nice? Is it really nice?
Well, now that I read this one, let me get out of it.
Just, you know what? Don't even keep that one. Throw it away. Just delete it totally, because it serves nobody in the system. It's not positive. It doesn't bring anything, and it's just a constant reminder of something negative. And I would rather turn that hater into a motivator. So just throw them away because they aren't worth the price of rice in China.
Okay.
Yes. And you know what they say about opinions.
Ooh.
So we have someone. I'm trying to see if they have a preferred name. Hold on, if it's a particular altar. Okay, so there's someone named Cassie who she emails us a lot, and she is very kind, and she's very supportive and encouraging, and I think anxious for, like, maybe for fur. Listen, like, I'm in Oklahoma and I just said fur. She's anxious fur. I think she's anxious for contacting us, or like feeling shy about it, and so I don't mean to put her on the spot, like I don't mean to make it worse by saying that, but I just wanted her to know, like, while she can hear my voice, that we adore her. She's super encouraging. I'm grateful for her emails, and it's very lovely to be learning how to make friends, and she's been an important part of that. So a shout out to Cassie.
Shout out to Cassie, and hi.
Right?
That's so nice. That's so validating, too, that she takes the time to do that. That's so brave and fearless.
So good.
I love it. High five to her and her system.
You're cracking me up right now.
Why?
Okay.
Look, I don't send hugs to your system because I know Taylor doesn't want to be touched.
Oh.
So instead, I said love and hugs and high fives.
That's funny. Okay.
You haven't noticed
Baby?
that?
A baby chewing my pencil.
I'm like, I can't send love and hugs to my friends, so I'm gonna
Why do I
send
call
them
it
love and
pencil?
high fives.
Yes. Okay, we have an email from Kim. I think Kim has written to us before, and she's delightful. Cracks me up. She sent an email to everyone. She said, Sasha, I'm so glad you had the idea for this podcast. I don't know which one. You did great on the last one, the 2 weeks in a hotel with all the kids. Oh, with M. When all the kids, we let the kids be on the podcast. I could not believe it.
Where they sing the song Puberty. I love it.
I keep forgetting to check our server because Discord won't give us
so, like,
I'm telling you.
notice.
When there's an issue that the outside kids are struggling with, he deals with it by taking a song they know and rewriting the lyrics, and they do a song video. And so they're adorable. I didn't know that she was going to let the kids be on the podcast. The husband was okay with how it turned out and approved it to go ahead and publish. And the songs were a hit. People went crazy over the songs. So we will play some more of the songs sometime.
Well, yes, and you're going to have to send me the puberty song because I have a little friend that is very engulfed in his stuff.
I can send it. They have like 50 songs done. Like, they're adorable.
So cute.
Kim said, Dr. E, I know how... Wait, sorry, we just got new glasses. Dr. E, I love how you're able to bring the clinical into the... I love how you're able to bring the clinical to the layman. Sometimes I need the broad clinical info, and sometimes I need the practical info, and you do a phenomenal job, and I understand why you're not on here a lot, but I love hearing from you. Do you think they're not too boring? They're so boring, I can't even listen to them.
Well, no, I don't think they're boring. And that podcast she did entitled Shame was really good.
Yeah.
And very, she like opened up a little bit. I think the problem is that sometimes they get a little, when she doesn't kind of put in like personal touches, if you will, or like an experience, a relatable experience, it makes them a little wordy. Does that make sense?
So wordy. It's so bad.
And sometimes, but I get good information from her, right? She's so smart. Dr. E is so
Mousy's
smart.
a she, her.
Because I think she was the one that sent me the advice probably like 3 weeks ago.
We'll probably put Mouse on the card like right
about,
after stream.
how one of my outside kids was staying up like around the clock. And the first time it happened, I thought it was because he had surgery, and I thought, well, maybe his like circadian rhythms are all screwed up from anesthesia.
Skull.
And then it happened a couple more times, and I'm like, what in the heck would cause him to keep like staying up all night? Because obviously he can't stay up all night by himself. Hello, autism, he will run.
Right.
And so I had reached out. And I think it was her or M that responded and said that sometimes that happens when they're going through growth spurts. Yeah. And I was like, you know what? That makes sense. Like, little man's going through a growth spurt. He's all out of whack.
Wow. I don't know how we know that. I don't know how she knows any of this stuff.
Maybe it was like the 15 years in college.
Ugh. Okay. So, Kim says, John, you are stinking amaze cakes.
Amaze cakes.
Amaze cakes.
Amaze cakes. I'm going to say that from now on. I can tell you know a lot more than you let on, and I hope to keep learning from you. Oh, that's so true, dude. That's so true. Salsa is the best. I'm a huge fan. I hope the girls are still wearing pants.
Of course they're wearing pants. This is the real world. We don't go outside
goodness. I hope the girls are still wearing pants and that you get mucho stickers because you rock. That's so funny. That's so funny.
He is so special. They just are so special.
The Taylors, you're not here a lot, but on the last pod I heard you speaking up and letting your concerns be made known. I'm not DID, but my fiance is, and I think it was super brave of you to say, hey, y'all are doing the most. Slow down and let's do this right. Good for you.
Oh, that must have been the Protector Powwow one. So this is from a while ago.
Okay, how do you know that? And what did she say?
Well, she was talking about how, it was soon after the conference, I think. And she was upset about the ADA stuff. And she had said in there that if, people don't start communicating, that there was going to be a mighty cruise missile. Well, not these words, but essentially things were going to get shaken up, and she was going to, let y'all know who holds the hand.
We don't want that to happen.
No, we don't. We like Taylor happy.
We do want Taylor happy. Molly, I love that you just came in and started ministering. Your faith in works is inspiring, and I hope to hear more from you. You have awakened my faith, and I have been struggling for a while after I learned my fiancé has DID. But something about you and what you do and how you speak has blessed me in a way I cannot explain. Thank you.
She's so good for the soul, that Molly. I love Molly.
Oh, wow.
She is. And she must be referring to when Molly read her testimony for church.
Oh.
Because that's the only one that Molly has done that was spiritual.
Gotcha. I read something in the notebook, on the last episode, I think.
Yeah, because you were snooping.
I was snooping, and she was writing all it, and I'm reading this, and I'm thinking, I don't actually even understand what you're saying. I'm trying to read this, and I'm trying to, but it would not sink in. It was not processing, and I told the husband about it later, and he was like, maybe because it wasn't your letter.
Ooh, he called you out.
He did. He did.
You'll make this a lighter.
Did you see my message the other day when you were like, I'm staying at home with the husband tonight? And I was like, hello, pleasure. And you were like, ha, no.
That was funny.
Oh, golly. I laughed so hard on that.
Oh, of course.
My
Mouse
husband's like, why are you laughing?
Mouse already considers. I'm assuming that's
another
Evie.
email and said, I just listened to Emma's pod. Emma, you are awesome sauce. I'm so happy for your breakthroughs, not losing time, grounding yourself, not panicking, and sleeping with no nightmares. Oh my gosh, you've come a long way from your first pod, and I'm just amazed at your growth and how everyone is working together to make things good for everyone. Wait,
that's
Emma?
From the Emma Stays podcast.
Emma?
Mm-hmm.
What?
Emma did the Emma Stays podcast. It's after, I think it's either before Megan's Rainbow or after. And I'm telling Sasha this because although she edits them, she doesn't listen to them.
You know what? I can edit, not perfectly, obviously, but I can edit by looking at them because I can see everyone takes a breath and then says,
Oh, yeah, that's so irritating. Then, okay, so Emma Stays is right there before Maladaptive.
Oh, okay. Donna said
You'll have to listen to that because that was really good. It talks about her experience with co-consciousness.
What?
And grounding to stay and preserving more time. I was really proud of her.
Donna said the same thing.
It was a really good podcast. That is it's a really good podcast. And you know how I tell you all the time when we're having a rough day, and I'm like, but look at the growth, and it's going to be such a huge change from where we are today to where we'll be in a year. This.
Oh wait, it has been a year.
But look at all the growth. But I'm even if we take it from from today to next year, it's going to be even more.
Oh my goodness. Well, Donna talked about the same one. She said, I'm so happy you had a day outside and that you felt safe enough to go outside and you could listen to others and still have presence so you could do something you needed. To hear you say you felt happy made me so happy for you. From your first podcast to this one, you have come so far. You're seeing progress and feeling it too. It was so good to hear you feel good and be proud of yourself, and I know more of these days are in your future. Again, so thrilled.
You know what that was?
What?
That was, okay, so when Emma did the Emma Stays podcast, it was also talking about how y'all had been stuck in Nerdville for 2 weeks. And how she could tell that, like, the littles and like, you and whatnot, were kind of antsy. And so she took you all on a run. And instead of just flat out running, she took into account, like, John and John Mark. She didn't call them by name. She still calls them the boy one. But that's okay. But she would, John Mark would tell her something, and then she would, give in to his wish and let him do it, whether it be, avoiding a snake or looking at a tree or crossing a stream. It was really good. I was really proud of her.
Wow. Yeah, I'm going to have to listen. I can see it by the, like, wavelengths or whatever when they take a breath and say, and I can just edit that out without listening to it.
It's so funny.
Yeah, well, you should start listening to some of them. Especially, like, Emma doesn't do a podcast very often. Like, she really has to feel like there's something there. You know what I mean? Like, there's been some kind of a change or whatever. And so, like, when she does one, you should really listen to it, especially since, I guess she's considered the host.
Oh. What? Oh. Okay, we're not going to talk about this one. I mean, talk about that.
But, yeah.
I'm done. No, this one is from Sarah that says, I want to tell your homegirl, Julie, that the two of you are awesome, and it's been really helpful for me to watch you or listen to you all learn how to be friends with each other. It's fun because you are both hilarious. You both are avoiding different things but hold each other accountable, and that's a pretty cool thing about friendship.
I like Sarah. We can let her. She can be a part of our fan club. Hey, listen. You know what irritated me? I got to thinking about this.
What?
Is that it irritates me that people sometimes put you in the category of, like, the not cooperative one. Or like the rebel. Or like the rebel, because that's not the case.
Oh, Julie, that's so funny you think so.
And I had to say this. I was like, if we do a podcast again, I need to mention that my, like, BFF is, like, not the discourse bringer. She is all down with peace and harmony, but, I mean, we have limitations. So don't assume that my friend Sasha is the person who is causing the fire.
Well,
putting the bug in a heart instead of having
hearts
shake it
up a little bit. You gotta let them know who they're playing with. But my God.
Just want to do it real quick. See what?
We all have our limits, but I think they think that you're the only one, and that you're driving the train on like the I'm going to rebel train, and that's not the case. You're just letting them know, this is how it is. I will tolerate this, and this is my boundary.
This email is from Kate. It says, hi guys, this is a message primarily for M. We listened to an episode of yours today, and you gave us intense insight into one of our own system members, who we have often misunderstood. There's so many similarities in your stories, the roles you play within the system, and I, for one, am grateful that you were able to share your experiences. I know, and then she gives the name of her insider, which I don't want to read. She was extremely emotional about this episode. She hates this diagnosis. The whole thing terrifies her, but by telling your story, you have given her a way of relating and understanding. So thank you, Em. We know how hard that was for you to do. From Kate.
Yes, and listen,
I think I like
this sounds like it's uncaring. I don't care if she cries in every podcast because she's sharing her feelings, and they're better out than in. And if she wants to cry, she can cry whenever she wants to. And she is just, I just love Em. I know you want to vomit because that's a lot of love, but I do. I could read it in your mind. You were like, should I call that out? No, I called it out for you. Ha, stole. You're awesome.
Well, this one says, hey, Sasha, please tell your BFF, Julie, that she is your friend and stop bad-mouthing her on the podcast.
Right? And who's that from so I can thank them directly?
It is from Andy, and Andy says, the two of you are hilarious, and it really helps to see how having support helps you learn things, process things, and also just give you a break from the hard work of therapy.
Right? I'm telling you. And thank you, Andy, because I can't count how many times she's told people I am crazy and that I am creepy or that I'm not her friend.
Oh, I'm learning.
It goes back to what I tell my children, you can't help stupid. I'm just teasing. You're not stupid.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Andy. Whose side are you on anyway?
Yeah, Andy, I think you picked the right side on that one.
No.
And I love you, and thank you for bringing it to my friend's attention that her number one friend is her friend. You rock, Andy. You're part of the fan club, too.
Oh, my goodness. The next one is from, I don't know how to say this. I don't want to say it wrong. It's AKI. Akai. What is that sound? Is that at your house or my house?
It's at my house. It's my engine doing weird things.
Oh, are you driving? Do you have to go?
Not yet. I'm watching Cars. Okay, so here's the beauty of me. I can look into my backyard and see the school, and I can watch the parent pickup line. And so I can see where the cars are so that I don't have to wait in line.
You're amazing.
Well, no, it's called I don't want to wait behind a bunch of people I don't enjoy. And so therefore I will sit in my driveway so I don't have to look at them.
No, I am telling you, the car pickup line is like the number one reason for homeschooling.
Oh my gosh. I can get car pickup line road
Okay,
rage.
like this better.
I got it. I got it. But it was addressed, it said, Julie, and then it had my address. I'm like, thank God. And my husband's like, somebody sent you this, but, it looks like a kid wrote it. And I'm like, that's because a kid did.
Oh my goodness.
And he goes, what do you mean? And I said, because I just refer, I just tell him Emma, because if I start getting into idiosyncrasies, then it starts to confuse him. And I'm like, one of the parts in Emma's system is a child, and they sent me a letter. And he's like, oh, that makes sense. I'm like, yes. And he was like, I didn't know that parts could write like children. I'm like, they're children.
Oh, that's funny.
He's kind of clueless. But you know what made me proud of him last night?
Being proud of him is way nicer than saying he's clueless.
I know. But he made me proud last night because it showed me that sometimes he does listen to me. And we were talking about, when the trigger I think I had told you about.
Yes.
Because I spent a significant amount of time yesterday with that trigger. But anyway, and he was talking about how that particular trigger doesn't make the effort to make their situation better.
Right.
They rely on everybody else, right? extremely codependent.
All right.
And he said, you know what? Your friend, Emma, is the epitome of perseverance.
Aww.
He said, she is my example of perseverance. He goes, because I think about all the things that, because, like, I know you share things about me with the husband, and he goes, I think about the things that you have told me, and the challenges that she's had to face, right?
No.
And he goes, if they can face all those challenges, right, and they still come out with, 3 masters, a doctorate, and a postdoc, right?
Yeah.
And they, can be hearing impaired, but yet here they are on a podcast, right, talking and living their best life, and face the cancer and everything else. If they can do all that and still have faced the challenges that they had that got them to those various points, he goes, and there is no reason why she can't make an extra added effort to persevere in her life, because your friend is the epitome of overcoming and persevering.
I don't even know what to say to that.
I was proud of him. I was like, wow, he does listen to me. I love him.
That makes me cry. I'm totally crying now.
But it's true. You really are. That's why I love you so much, because you all are like me. Like, we have faced really hard challenges, but despite it all, we still persevered. They couldn't hold us down. So we can, like, stand up and be like, ha, screw you. We still rose. We're like phoenixes. Yeah, we're like phoenixes. We rose from the ash.
Oh, well, I'm going to kick some ash for sure.
Thank you for joining us with System Speak, a podcast about dissociative identity disorder. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes, or follow along on our website, www.systemspeak.org.
Oh, make
Thanks
a
for
version
listening.
with a background. Or save it as PNG Trooper. Mouse. I think we will make Mouse blink, but we will also have the shiny, so that if Mouse gets like especially excited, Mouse can hit a button to bring shiny to eyes. Let's see. I think after I finish this, which is pretty much almost done, I just gotta add the background and make the blinking and stuff and the shiny. I think I will do some doodles, and then I will color Nubia and Zoey. I'm so excited. I love how this came out. It's so cute. Wee.
Dr. Peter Barish attended Johns Hopkins University and the University of Michigan. He received a PhD in clinical psychology from Case Western Reserve University. He is clinical senior instructor in psychiatry at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine in Cleveland, Ohio. Since 1984, he has been in private practice in the Cleveland area with Horizons Counseling Services. His clinical approach is relational and supportive. He specializes in working with people with dissociative disorders and adult survivors of trauma. He also works with depression and anxiety. He is trained in EMDR and clinical hypnosis. Dr. Barish is the author of scientific and clinical articles on dissociation and dissociative identity disorder.
He is a past president of the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation. Within the dissociative disorders field, he is known for having first highlighted the link between disordered attachment and the origins of DID. He also chaired the committee that produced the first set of treatment guidelines for adults with DID in 1993 and has participated in revisions of the guidelines. In addition to his writings on dissociation, Dr. Barish served as a script consultant for broadcast media and as a reviewer for several journals. He has also served as an expert witness in civil and criminal matters. In addition to maintaining a private practice, Dr. Barish currently works for the Cleveland VA Medical Center, where he evaluates veterans who have applied for disability compensation. He is not appearing on this podcast as a VA employee. The opinions he expresses are his own and do not necessarily represent the Department of Veterans Affairs or its policies. I was delighted to have Dr. Peter Barish on the podcast and to interview him. I very much appreciated his perspective and gained new insights as he clarified some of my concerns. He also answered some of the historical questions we had about treatment guidelines. We also shared a history of the VA, as both of my parents worked in the VA as I was growing up, and we also did our postdoc residency for chaplaincy at a VA hospital. So while he is not at all representing the VA on this podcast, we shared that cultural history together, and it was something that connected us from the beginning. Welcome, Dr. Peter Barish.
The VAs can be an awesome place to work. I did my pre-doctoral internship at the Pittsburgh VA, and I learned so much. I want to tell you a story about my experience there. The person who was chief of psychology at that time, his name is Arnold Friedman, and he has recently retired from his private practice in Pittsburgh. On my first day in the VA, he and I and another psychology intern went to see a veteran who had been admitted to the hospital because he had phantom limb pain. They couldn't figure out how to relieve it. He had lost his leg in a kamikaze attack on his ship during World War II. So that tells you how long ago this incident was. This was about 1980, when they really hadn't even named PTSD yet. Or were just about to put it in the DSM-3 at that time. So the man had phantom limb pain, which basically means he's experiencing pain in the limb that he lost. So the pain is really coming from the central nervous system. So Dr. Friedman is totally awesome at getting rapport with people quickly. So he had never met this man. There was no reason this man would have to trust him. But within a few minutes, they had a good working sense of an alliance between them. And I was watching, along with my fellow intern, and Arnie, who used clinical hypnosis for many years, asked if he could help him to deal with his phantom limb pain with hypnosis. And the man said, sure. So Arnie helped him get into a hypnotic trance and had him go back and basically relive what happened when he lost his leg. And at that point, the man was really there and re-experiencing what happened in his trauma. And the thing that came out that was new for him as he was reliving this experience was how much guilt he felt that he had survived and others had died. And in the most gentle way, Arnie suggested to him that, it might be okay to let go of that guilt for now if you really don't need it. And maybe you don't need to have your pain as a way to remember how guilty you felt.
Wow.
And then he said, and this has been a very difficult memory for you to have. And if you want to leave it behind when you come out of trance, that's okay. Or you can remember it all when you come out of trance. So then he helped the man get out of trance and get reoriented to being in his bed in the VA hospital on the medical floor. The man didn't remember what happened, but his phantom limb pain was gone. And in a 6-month follow-up, it hadn't come back.
Wow.
So I learned two things from that. The first thing I learned was how important it is to make a personal connection with somebody as soon as you can, so that there can be the basis for development of trust. And the other thing I learned was the power of hypnosis. So I did a whole year's rotation in that internship and had a lot of experience working with traumatized people. But the other thing that I took from that is what you get from a mentor. Arnie is one of the people who is behind me in my imagination, obviously, that I can call upon anytime I need him. I can think about what it would be like if he were here right now. What would he help me do? Now, he is 92, and he's still alive and still in Pittsburgh, and I saw him a couple of years ago. He didn't remember this incident, but he was pleased to hear about it. So all of us, whether we are somebody's client or somebody's therapist, have had experience with somebody that we can take with us and keep with us on our shoulder or standing behind us in some way to provide support during the difficult times that we have. And
I gotta show you Mouse. Oh, I missed a little tough. Oh, that's okay. I was gonna say this top. I don't think that's a bad thing. Look at me, I'm a mouse. So here's step 1. Oh, I need to add a hotkey. This key is so hot. Maybe I'll just make it a 1. Oh wait, no. Oh, I should make this a 1. And make this a 2. There we go. That's so cute. Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to raise the sensitivity on the mic. That's no problem. Oh, you made something for Mouse! What is he? What is he? Where is he? Wait. Oh! That's so cute! Oh my gosh! I love it! Oh, Mouse loves it too. Squeaking of Mouse, I want to play the video again. Before I move on to doodles. I guess I don't. No, I just mice. Oh, you know what's funny? This clip here with these two mouse, I always thought this was from like some kind of like old like PBS cartoon, but this is from AOSTH too. Because sometimes they put clips from other shows in YouTube poop, so I thought this was from a different show, but then these mouse showed up in one of the episodes we were watching. We're like, oh, mice real. Anyway, okay.
Mice, gonna make mice. I never should have made mice. I should have made a hot dog. According to mice, 22 mice, 4,000 mice, a fat ton of mice, 1 billion mice. That's too many rodents. Spray will take care of you. Mice. Shut up! Have a free sample of mice. Double mice, you leaf. Unnecessary! With this game in my power, we can conquer Mobius once and for all! With mice! Where did the mouse come from? Mice! Jump out of the Mappy! Mappy! Mice!
Do your windows, Mac?
Mappy! Then I fill it with mice! Didn't I tell you? I just love mice so much! How mousy of me. No furry.
Yeah, right.
Frog. Gonna make mice. Boom, boom, boom. Gonna make my boom boom boom. Gonna make my boom boom boom. Gonna make what? Every creature on Mobius will be mice. Get out of my! I've decided to dedicate my mice. Squeak, 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 squeak.
Mice.
I'm such a disgusting mouse lover.
He's a mouse lover.
No one makes fun of me. No one. You're spoiling my mouse party.
Okay, I got it.
If I want something done right, I've got mice to do it for me.
If I were that little mouse with the red ribbon in my hair.
Cast iron mouse. Stop. Peek-a. Shut your mouth. Squeak.
Squeak.
Squeak Robotnik sure got some serious squeaks.
Does this mean I'm not gonna be a paperweight? Mice. Find mice. Of course there's a rodent day. I just declared it 1 minute ago in honor of mice. What do you want us to do with these mice, Dr. Robotnik? Take care of them.
How mousy of me. Oh yeah, Mouse made a Tumblr a few days ago and the username is how mousy of me. Oh yeah, I use paint for the doodles. Take care of them. I can't remember what line it was, but we were watching AOSTH and there was like I knew that was one of the mices they used because he said like my something that starts with an S, like myself, or I was like, oh, I hear a mice in there. Oh, I think it might have been when he said, of course there's a Robotnik Day. I just declared it in honor of myself. And I was like, oh, I see. He just cut that word myself early and then he said mice. I blanked out on, oh yeah, doodles, and then I'm gonna play more of the podcast. I might, wait, oh, I see, that's why that's not coming up, because I need to drag it up there. What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, I might pause the podcast every time I start a new one, just to tell you what I'm coloring. Or doodling. So I got Cuddle and Deku nerding out.
That was one of the people I learned that from.
That's really powerful.
I thought so.
Wow.
So before there was EMDR, there was hypnosis, and a lot of people in those days, back in the 80s, used hypnosis to help trauma survivors process what had happened, abreact or relive it in a therapy session as a way to process trauma. And many therapists still use it, and I do also, along with the EMDR. But it's one way to help people process what happened and to kind of move away from reliving it so much.
What do they do in a hypnosis session? I mean, I know it's unique to each person, but just generally, what is that like?
Well, since the reason we're talking has to do with the idea, I just want to say that many people in the field understand that DID is a form of hypnosis that people have developed to cope with trauma and to deal with daily life. So when people switch, when their alters take over, they're going through kind of a mini hypnotic moment of going inside and changing their focus of what aspect of themselves or what part or what alter is on the outside. With DID, are very easily able to get into hypnosis in a situation where they feel safe enough to do that. So it's really useful as a way to try and make some communication with some of the parts that haven't presented themselves. It's also a way to help the parts learn to get better connected to each other. one of the first presidents of ISSTD, International Society for the Study of Trauma Dissociation, was a guy from Ohio, a psychiatrist named David Call. David unfortunately died before he took office in 1988, but David invented a technique called the conference room, which is imagining inside that there's a big table in a conference room, and that whatever parts of you, whatever alters are willing to be there, can sit around the table and take a look at each other or talk to each other or listen to each other. It's a way to start to build some connections.
Wow.
So he developed it first, and then George Fraser, who's a Canadian psychiatrist, used essentially the same technique under a different name called the dissociative table technique. Both of them published about this. So hypnosis is the way to help someone do that, to begin to use their resources of imagination and building bridges within to make some connections and get some cooperation going, or at least some negotiation for common goals.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really useful.
How is EMDR the same or different?
Well, EMDR is much more structured than hypnosis. It's got standardized protocols that the therapist follows unless somebody gets stuck. One way that it's different than hypnosis is the experience of EMDR is kind of like you're in two places at once. When you're doing the eye movements or hearing or watching the lights move back and forth, you are just allowing yourself to go with that experience, and whatever feelings, memories, sensations, and beliefs in the trauma that you're working with, you're in them, but you're also in the present moment, connected to a stimulus in the room with you, the lights, the therapist's voice, whatever is going on. So you shuttle back and forth much more easily in EMDR between the past and the present, which a lot of people like because you don't get so swallowed up in the trauma. You get to step in and out of it a little more. It's like you put your toe in the water, then your ankle in the water, and maybe your knee. And when you've had enough, you can just open your eyes or say to the therapist, stop, and that gets respected. With hypnosis, it's less, there's more of a sense of being inside, reliving it. And it can get pretty overwhelming. Although there are ways to modify what goes on so that it's less so.
That's amazing. Why are some of these being lost? Which is maybe an overstatement or a generalization, but I mean, and I know there's practical answers like managed care and limited sessions and...
You mean, why is hypnosis not being used?
Yes, why are not more people doing that if it's so...
I agree. Richard Clough has been saying for years that knowing hypnosis is understanding it is an essential part of being able to work with people who have DID, and I couldn't agree more strongly. Where things started to go wrong with using hypnosis was really with the onset of the false memory syndrome people, because they started to claim that hypnosis was causing people to develop false memories based on suggestions that their therapists gave them while they were...
You have the Doodle Tumblr link? I don't have a Tumblr for Doodle. You mean the Tumblr where I post them? Because that would just be the main Tumblr. I still need to post all our Doodles. Hopefully I remember tomorrow. And I could get the mousy Tumblr linky.
We're in trance.
Which was false, and we've come so far. Like, I feel like just now we're sort of rising above that and moving past it, which is the impact of it was like 20 years.
Sure.
So
one of the reasons they got involved, the false memory people got involved as strongly as they did in fighting the treatment of dissociative disorders, was because there were some people who recalled abuse and then went to sue their parents or whoever the perpetrators were. And then when they get into court, it turned out that some of their memories had been retrieved during hypnosis. And one of the people who was on the scientific advisory board of the False Memory Syndrome Foundation at the time, Martin Orn, had really written a lot about why hypnotically retrieved memories shouldn't be admissible in court, and generally they aren't nowadays.
Still edit some
by
things
having
little, like the
a
colors,
scientific advisory board say that this was going on and that there was something called recovered memory therapy, it scared a lot of therapists who were afraid of being sued and scared some who were being sued out of doing this work. A lot of really talented people dropped out of treating dissociation at that time, which is a real tragedy. And yeah, I do think things are coming back now.
I feel like you've just answered a different question for me that I didn't even have words for. In that,
oh, what was it?
Well, next week is the ISSTD conference. Right?
Yes.
And so.
And I wish I could go, but I can't.
Right, me either. I have to speak somewhere else already. But at the same time, so there's me and a few other advocates for DID survivors that got together at the Infinite Mind Conference in Florida. And while we were there, we have planned a counter conference during the same time as the ISSTD conference.
Yeah, I saw that. That's really a cool idea. I wish I could listen in more, but I'm seeing clients that day.
Well, here's what we want to do, though. Like, I want to be clear that we are not like ISTD haters. I don't want the media to misinterpret that or turn it around. But we want information accessible to survivors who don't have clinical access to that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
And we want it accessible to deaf people and blind people, so everything is being transcribed. All the pictures are having caption descriptions, and it's also free, and we're recording it so that it will all be either on the podcast or on YouTube. And so people at any time can go watch these or look at it. And because of our limitations in our first year, we're going to do our best and put on the best that we can or whatever, But one of the things that I talk about, because I'm giving the keynote for this, and one of the things that I talk about is how there's this strange gap of this 20 years where almost nothing happened other than, as far as research or new treatment, other than older treatments being repackaged into smaller models or faster models or this or that, but not this full reclaiming. And I think part of it really is about what you just said and what happened with the false memory. Like, we as a system, meaning clinicians and survivors together, not just the internal system, but the greater system as a whole, have really been wounded by this.
Oh, yeah.
And it's taking time to recover from it, and we're just now getting our feet back under us.
I'm really glad that this is happening too. And also that now there's some good outcome research. There wasn't much before. Colin Ross and his associates did a little bit, but now there's some published outcome research that's a lot better that Dr. Brand has spearheaded. Long-term treatment outcome studies with very clear goals and ways to measure progress. I think it's wonderful that kind of thing is going on, because it wasn't present at the time when we first wrote treatment guidelines for DIT back in 1993.
Right. And so what's happened in those 20 years, I'm using 20 as a generic number, but what's happened?
It's pretty close, yeah.
Yeah. What's happened in those 20 years, though, while everyone almost had to go on pause, is that people who were already in treatment just had to continue with what they had access to. And then now there's 3 or 4 generations of new survivors who can't get access to treatment or have very limited access to treatment. And clinicians who are really good at what they do, but are scared to do DID, so to speak.
Yes.
And so there's this divide, like a wound systemically between clinicians and survivors, where it's hard not just to find a therapist, but as an educated person or as a person trying to educate others, to connect or collaborate. To bring healing to that wound to help all of us.
Yes, I know exactly what you're talking about. We used to have an Ohio Society for Clinical Dissociation that had annual conferences. 100, 150 people used to come. And when Medicare rules changed so that it became impossible to really give people any length of hospital treatment, people would then end up going in the
50.
hospital and get told that we don't want to hear from your personalities. They're not allowed to come out here,
Right.
which was just destructive. And this happened around the same time as these lawsuits against therapists
Right.
became a serious issue in the 90s. So as a result, now I only know a few people in Ohio who work with DID, and only a couple in the Cleveland area, two or three. So it's not good.
Right. I drive 4 hours to see my therapist in another state. Because it's the only one that I could find, and also she's really good, so I'm happy with her now and I want to stay there. But when Kathy Steele, I live in Kansas City now, and when Kathy Steele came to town, like 150 people came out of the woodwork to come hear her speak, and I was like, where have you been?
Yeah.
What have you been doing?
I heard your presentation or your episode about shame, in which you discussed a lot of what she said.
Right.
That was very well argued. I agreed with some of what you said and disagreed with some, but you really did a good job at explaining what her position was and where you thought it was lacking or where you disagreed with it. I really got a lot out of listening to that.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I have continued to study more of what she said and looked up more. And so I feel like that's a progression. It was just that's the one thing that's difficult about a podcast, right? Like, it's not the same as a person. So it's like a snapshot. So I feel like that's continued to evolve and I understand it more. But I'm learning and trying to grasp it and hold on to it. In your office or with someone with DID, how do you explain what trauma and dissociation is?
Well, I explain that trauma is basically defined as an experience that is too overwhelming to deal with at the time. And so that's a pretty broad definition.
Right.
And dissociation is one of the ways that people cope with being overwhelmed at the time of a trauma. For example, I was driving home from work, and the light turned green for me, and another car hit the front end of my car as I was going through the intersection. Nobody was injured, but my car was nearly totaled. And I remember the feeling of watching it happen in slow motion. I slowed down the motion. My brain slowed down the motion so that I wouldn't get completely swamped and terrified by what was going on. So the police came. They gave me a ride home, which was really nice. And I was very calm until I got home. Then I started shaking. And then I was, very upset. Even though nobody was injured, it was like I dissociated my fear until I got home and I was in a safer place. So those are small examples of it. So dissociation is a way that people protect themselves from overwhelming experiences. And when it starts, it's not voluntary. It's just something the body does because trauma happens in the body, obviously, and it lives there.
And you've actually connected two pieces for me. Again, I'm really enjoying speaking with you.
Thank you. I like talking
helpful.
with you also.
I just got the Coping with Trauma-Related Dissociation workbook.
Oh, that's really helpful.
I've
given it to a bunch of clients. So.
Oh, well, I just got it for a group, and one of the things I was just reading about today was talking about time speeding up and slowing down. And that was the first time I had seen it described, and now you've just talked about it. And so my brain is very, very focused on that because I just found words for that experience. So I have a question, a follow-up question.
Sure.
Can that happen over an extended time as well and not just in the crisis moment?
Like, what do you mean?
Well, so for example, without going into detail, just adverse experiences kind of list.
Is waving at you.
In recent years, both of my parents died, and we fostered 70 kids, and we adopted 6 with special needs, and the youngest one has been on palliative care and in and out of the hospital for 3 years. And I feel like all of this happened really quick, and we didn't know any of it was going to happen, and it all like piled on each other faster. That's part of how we ended up getting diagnosed, because it was more than we could keep up with. And so
These pigtail things
that's
are
when
hard
sort of
to
everything fell apart,
draw.
and I got the diagnosis, found the therapist. But what's happened is I feel like it all happened in about a period of 3 or 4 years. And I feel like those 3 or 4 years were like 10 or 20 years.
Oh, yeah.
And now, since finding the therapist and have been in therapy for a year, actively, like actually participating with her, another therapist that didn't know about DID before her, and now the podcast and in group, and the more that I talk about these things and process these things, I feel like my life is speeding back up, and it feels like not in an anxious way, but in I'm moving back towards a baseline kind of way.
More like you're living in the moment instead of just being swept along by events that were too much, so they had to slow down for you to cope.
Right.
Is that it?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Sure. Yeah. Well, you answered your own question. Your experience tells you the answer.
That's fascinating.
Yeah. Well, what you said was fascinating, but yeah, it makes complete sense to me. Yeah, I've never had anything like that happen, but I could see how that would have occurred with all those things going on so quickly, simultaneously, and one after another.
So, were you in the ISSTD as well?
Well, let me tell you how I got started working with dissociation. The first time I saw somebody with a dissociative disorder was in my first placement in graduate school, which was in a state mental hospital for people who were chronically mentally ill. It was a long-term hospital, and this was at the beginning of the movement to try and get everybody out of these hospitals in the community, which was an unfortunate mess.
Yes.
Yeah, everybody in the hospital was diagnosed pretty much with what they used to call SCUT, which is a horrible acronym for schizophrenia chronic undifferentiated type. And they were all on heavy, heavy doses of antipsychotic medication. So one of the people there were also people there who had been sent there by the courts. They'd been found not guilty by reason of insanity of committing various kinds of felonies. And one of them was a woman who looked like the other patients in that she was heavily medicated and she was not able to do much other than walk around and ask people for cigarettes, which they had in the hospital in those days. She had gotten pregnant by another patient, and the hospital was trying to decide how she would function in the community, whether she was going to be able to manage taking care of a baby and so on. The reason she was there was that she had set the house on fire and her mom had died in the fire.
Oh, wow.
So nobody really understood why she had done that. There was no clear reason as to why she'd done that. We know that she'd been abused. We, meaning my co-therapist and I, knew that she had been abused by her father, but we didn't know what the issue was with her mother. So while talking to her one day and asking her to think back to those days, now I know what happened. She switched and she relived the fire.
Oh, goodness.
After doing that in the session, which like shocked the heck out of me because I'd never seen that happen with a client before. I mean, like I'm telling you, I'd been in school for a year, in graduate school. I remembered something I'd read in the police report that was in her file. After the fire, while they were putting the fire out, she'd been found in the bushes down the street, just sitting in the bushes, and the police officer asked her what her name was, and she said Fig. So I asked her at the end of this session, what do you think that meant? And she says, well, I don't know. I guess that meant I was a figment of somebody's imagination. So I thought this was a great therapeutic breakthrough.
Wow.
I went home all pleased with myself. Gee, I helped this happen. I came back the next day and she didn't remember the session, any of it. She didn't remember that we'd met or anything at all like that. And I didn't realize what that was, that this was someone who had DID and had never been diagnosed until I saw the next person with DID, which was a couple of years later in a completely different setting. It was an outpatient mental health center, and this woman had come in, and the reason she wanted help was, I want you to tell me, she would say with a smile, I want you to tell me why I stay with my husband when I don't love him. So we've been doing like standard talk therapy for a couple of months, and after she left, I made my notes, and I opened my door, and then she was sitting on the floor crying like a little girl, and in talking to her, I realized this was another part of her. So that was the first time that I saw that she had alters or parts. And I made some connections with other people in the area who had some experience working with MPD, as it was called back in those days, and started to get very interested in learning more, obviously, so I could figure out what was going on and try to help her. So around 1986, I started going to ISSTD conferences and presented a couple of papers there, and then got asked to chair the writing of the treatment guidelines that we first put out in 1993. So that's how I got into it.
Oh, wow.
The impetus for the treatment guidelines actually came from someone at an insurance company. One of the presidents of ISSTD had a good friend from medical school who was the medical director of a large insurance company, who told him, you guys really ought to have some treatment guidelines, because we don't know what to do with, approving visits for these people. So then I got asked to chair the committee, and we spent 3 years writing the first set of guidelines. So it came from an insurance company. That's one of the few good things that comes from them.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Do you know why they've not updated them?
Well, they have. I mean, the last update was in 2011. So that's now on the ISSTD website.
Maybe.
But that was before the DSM-5.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to change much, because DID itself really didn't change much from DSM-4 to DSM-5.
Interesting.
Yeah. I mean, there's more research to support the guidelines, but I don't think the general recommendations have changed at all.
Right. We talk about it at the counter conference. The thing that we would just a change in language from patients to clients, because it's just more modern now.
There's mixed feelings about that, and I sort of alternate both because I work in a hospital now, but the word client comes from a Latin root meaning to lean on somebody.
Oh.
So some people don't like that for that reason, because it implies a kind of dependence.
Interesting. I didn't know that. I have worked in hospitals, and I do know that there the language is much more patients, just because of the general population, whether they're psych patients or not. And so I understand that culture of it. But you gave me another piece I didn't know, and I'll be glad to explain that.
I mean, people who are medically trained or work in medical facilities are going to use the word patient, and a lot of people with other training, psychology, social work, counseling, and so on, have been trained to use clients, especially recently.
Do you think that there will be any big impact from the ICD-11 being with PDD instead of OSDD, with the partial DID, or is it just a
I've never heard of
change?
PDD.
I don't know. I never get to see the actual definitions of those terms in ICD-11. It's really unfortunate that developmental trauma disorder didn't make it into the DSM-5. It should have, because that really is complex trauma or complex PTSD.
That was shocking.
Yeah, it was terrible.
That was really well documented in The Body Keeps Score. I appreciate that he provided that written history of it and gave the whole context of it.
Yeah, that is such a wonderful book. I recommend it to a lot of people, and I learn a lot from it. I wish I had training in body-oriented therapies. My experience as a patient or client, however you want to call it, in Gestalt therapy and in Gestalt therapy workshops, which are offered a lot around Cleveland, that has really helped me to understand how to be aware of what's going on in my own body as a client and also as a therapist. And to help clients, gently direct clients to just notice what's going on.
Interesting. How do you manage that when you were working with the intensity of past trauma?
I think it starts on the first day. When somebody comes in, I tell them that, this may seem odd if you've had other therapists and they haven't done that, but there are going to be times when I ask you to notice, what's going on in your body. What do you notice physically? Because trauma lives in the body. Emotions are a body experience. And sometimes it's another source of information for you to get more connected to you. So I may ask you those questions. Let me know if it's uncomfortable. But if it isn't, just play along with it and see what you find out.
How do you manage it for yourself?
I mean, I'm very much a skeptic about supernatural things, but I can't explain exactly how this happens. But recently I had an experience. This was last week. I was sitting with somebody who does not have a dissociative disorder that I work with for several years. This is a person who's very depressed, but has a lot of anger. And he was talking very softly in a very kind of depressed way. And I noticed that I was like tapping my fingers like that on the arm of my chair. And I thought, what's going on with that? So I asked him to just notice what's going on inside. And he said he was feeling agitated. And then he said he's feeling a little angry. And I said, and I've been tapping in the arms of my chair. I guess I'm picking it up. So we had a laugh together about that. And then he was able to talk about his anger.
Wow.
So another experience also last weekend, because I see patients on Saturday. Oops, clients, whatever word you like.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
I was working with someone who does have DID, and I noticed a feeling of moisture around my eye. And I said to the client, I don't know what you're experiencing, but I'm feeling some sadness. And then she said, I feel like crying. So somehow we had that shared moment of communication that I can't explain.
Wow.
Or if I'm holding my breath, I might point that out to someone. I notice I'm holding my breath as you're talking, and then they will often just take a little notice of what's going on internally and just go from there.
That's amazing, though, that just being in tune with that. And that feels like a physical expression of some of those shame theory attunement talks as well.
Oh, I think so, yeah. Of course, the risk is if it's coming from something that the person has triggered in me, I have to be careful to own it. Right. So if I made a comment like that and they're going, no, I don't feel anything like that, then I'm not going to go, yeah, right, yeah, you're not being honest with yourself. I won't think that way. I'll say, okay, well, I'm not sure where this is coming from, and just sit with the experience.
How do you handle having to listen to the hard stories that people tell?
I know there was a time some years ago when I stopped doing private practice for a while and did full-time courtroom work. And then I missed it and realized that I had really gotten burned out because I wasn't taking care of myself. So I was really happy to get back into private practice and to have had some therapy of my own to get better connected with what was going on with me. But, it's not my trauma. I can feel a lot of feelings about what has happened to someone else, but it didn't happen to me. And I'm talking to someone who somehow got through that and has resources that I can't possibly understand at the moment, but we're going to figure it out together because that's a strength that they have that they don't usually credit themselves for. And this is a really good quote I found from Harry Stack Sullivan, who was a psychoanalyst who died in 1950 or so. Right. He said, your emotional life is not written in cement during childhood. You write each chapter as you go along.
Oh, that's powerful.
It was very powerful. And he also said something to me when I saw this is really something I think about almost every day. He said, all of us are much more human than otherwise. And I've worked with all kinds of people and assessed people in the court system who had done just horrible things to others, horrible things, the kind of things that we treat people for who've experienced those things. And I have to keep that in mind. So if I'm talking to somebody who's been through horrendous trauma, they're a human being just like I am. And I want to understand what they brought, with what they brought to themselves, what resources they had, what people that they had encountered in their life, what they built in themselves to help them survive it. And if I focus on that, then I tend not to get overwhelmed. But it also helps that I work in an office with people I trust. And if any of us really get swamped one day by what we're hearing, we can go and talk to each other. And that helps tremendously to not do this work alone.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking that, that's such a, whether that's personal or professional, that's such a important thing, both having support and having connection with others, but also knowing those limits of when you need to care for yourself or burnout or preventing. I know that I worked early in my career with adolescent sex offenders, and then later in private practice, and then when my parents both died, it was just bam bam.
and one expected and one not expected, and I wasn't even aware of like the other layers that would complicate that grief. And so I definitely during that season had to limit my practice, and then when I found out about the DID, I did not take clients in the office anymore. It's just not my season for that to be appropriate, and it was a challenge to adjust or to realize those self-care pieces in a new level.
I think it's so important that you did that, not just for you, but for your clients.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sure you know of cases where people have had therapists who couldn't stay connected with them, or who got blasé or cynical or doubted what they were saying because the therapists were burnt out, or because they had their own trauma histories and had not dealt with them.
Right.
So I do an annual presentation at the VA to the postdoctoral psychology students about private practice, and a lot of it is the nuts and bolts stuff of how do you get referrals and how do you get on insurance panels. But I always tell them at the end that many of us in this field, and I say myself included, have had some trauma in our life, and it makes a huge difference in the work in how you can help people when you do get care for yourself first. Or, so in the while you're doing treatment, that you have your own issues and you're working on them so that they don't get in the way of your being present and available and genuine with your patients or clients.
Right. And that's such powerful wisdom. And I know that when I started private practice, I specifically didn't take trauma clients because that
was wise.
Right. Well, but I didn't understand why. I just intuitively, I knew that was not an area for me. There are other people that are good for it, and I was okay with setting those boundaries. Mm-hmm. But the further I got, as I gained experience, I guess, over the years, the more I realized that trauma really comes in a lot of different forms.
It sure does.
And you can't just completely avoid everything. So...
Well, one way you can is if the only kind of treatment you're going to do is cognitive therapy, because then you can not get connected to your emotions, and you can help your client not get connected to them, and it's all just nice and superficial. And I think it's a bunch of BS if that's all you do.
Right.
But that's all they're teaching people in graduate school nowadays, and it's a darn shame. I mean, it's a great tool, but you can't stop there.
I feel like that's one reason I wanted to include the interviews on the podcast, is because I feel like there are so many gifted clinicians who, it goes back to, it's not just the science, but also an art. And I don't want that lost. And I want this.
I think this is the most accurate colors for Nubia.
Did real therapy and who have so much to give and to pass on, and to... I feel like it's time for it all to come full circle somehow. And I don't know what that means or what that looks like exactly. And I don't know what small part I can play in helping that. But conversation seems like a place to start.
Oh, absolutely. You're doing so much. And one of the things you're doing is making available to the people who listen to your podcast information about what good therapy is like, and what you can talk about in therapy. And, if you get a therapist who doesn't want to hear any of this, run away.
Right.
You've got somebody who's going to hurt you.
Right. And
I feel like the overalls are too dark.
Kind of in an attunement way again, if you start to resonate more with what therapy can look like and what the process can look like, and having an accurate depiction of that, then you're more likely to see it when you encounter it. And so we've moved from a society where the abuse cycle repeats, or we have people who are abused when they're young, and so then they get in all these abusive experiences when they grow up. We've moved now because of all these systemic wounds, I feel like, where people are abused when they're little, grow up and get in domestic violence or substance abuse or whatever else goes on. But then they also go through one bad therapist after another. We still have to come up with a
background, I'm realizing. I can always add that later.
Look for the people who are really knowing, and then also for clinicians, helping them connect to how to get trained or how to do it well, and what that looks like for them.
Wow, it's weird when you isolate a color. It's just like so much more
I like working with therapists as clients, including a few who have had DID.
My first one in January at the conference in Florida, and I couldn't believe there was another one.
Maybe I'll make this.
Oh, yes.
It really surprised me. And then when I interviewed Susan Peace Bannett, I had a very powerful experience with her talking about that and sort of coming out. I mean, it should have been obvious, but for me, my personal process of sort of coming out loud even to myself of, this is my identity and it includes this piece, and I'm going to have to deal with this piece.
Yes. And you're doing the responsible thing at figuring out where your limits are for what you can and can't do while taking care of yourself, too.
Right.
That's huge. I was interested about what you said about working with adolescent sex offenders. What was that like for you?
Interesting on a lot of layers. It was, I got assigned there for my doctorate, as how I landed that job and how I got involved with that. And my experience with them was that every one of them that I worked with had also been traumatized. And there was a lot of what I now know and understand as triggers for myself. And so self-care was very hard for me during that season.
Oh, my goodness.
But I didn't understand that. I didn't understand why at the time. And I resonated with them in a lot of ways that the other clinicians didn't. And so I didn't have a problem with running groups or walking into really escalated situations. It was not an issue of, I had bad boundaries with them. I don't mean like I was hanging out with them, but I think there was somehow a stigma and a fear that some of the other clinicians on the unit had that they tried to pretend they didn't have, that I was just in tune with and okay with and talked about out loud. And so I think in some ways I had something to offer, and in other ways I understood differently. But at the same time, there were, the scariest thing was always having to do the court reports and talk about recidivism and are they really okay to go home or not, or feeling a responsibility for that. That was hard.
Oh, yeah, I can't imagine. I used to say that I don't work with perpetrators. And I know that when I said that, this is a long time ago, it was out of my anger at what people had done to my clients who I cared about. And I had to eat those words because I'd been working for some time with a woman who had DID and a history of ritual abuse and knew both those things when she came to work with me. I had to eat those words because she started to talk about how she had perpetrated as part of what she'd been forced to do.
Right.
And part of her very much liked that, and other parts of her were horrified by it. And she had to really sort of test me out to make sure I was okay with that. And it was difficult for both of us, but it worked. So I was able to stick with it, and I stopped saying that.
Those are intense layers to get to.
Oh, my goodness.
And where I worked and where I lived, it's a very rural area between Kansas and Oklahoma and over into Arkansas and up into Missouri, where the four states meet. It's a very, very rural area. And my experience, and I know I'm stereotyping, is that there are these pockets of very, very good people and very, very scary people. And there's a lot of ritual abuse in these little pockets. And even when we were fostering, there would be like an entire bus on a whole community and have like 30 kids at once that needed placement. And it was really hard. And realizing that this was a layer prevalent in this area and there's no one treating it, there's no one talking about it until I found this therapist. But very, very few people that even know how to deal with it. So
I mentioned David Call earlier, and the conference room technique. One of the other things that he said, unfortunately, he never wrote much, but he said this when someone asked him about what the goals of treatment were for MPD. Remember, it's the 80s, right?
Right.
He said, "It seems to me that after treatment, you want a functional unit, be it a corporation, a partnership, or a one-owner business."
Oh, I love
I really
that.
like that.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah, he really saw so much. I wish he'd lived to write more.
That really gives a context and a familiar application to express that.
Mm-hmm.
The model of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very down-to-earth way of saying things because that's how he was. He was very much like an old farm kind of guy, very matter-of-fact in what he said, and he didn't put on airs, and he said what he thought. I really wished he'd been around more to contribute to the field, but he unfortunately passed away.
Obviously, anyone who chooses integration in a formal sort of solidifying way and does that work and it works well for them, that's wonderful. And I think the idea of having functional multiplicity in some form on that continuum to focus on functioning and getting there as part of the process when something else feels so far away, I can see why that makes sense. I am uncomfortable with and this is going to be a bit controversial for some of my audience, but I am uncomfortable with identifying as plural as just for a lifestyle, because for me, and I'm just speaking for myself, and I know I'm about to speak at the plural conference, so that sounds contradictory, but I don't want to identify with the maladaptive process that's a response to all that trauma. I don't want this to be the end of my story. And I know that they are trying to make it a positive thing and a welcoming thing and an accepting thing in whatever part of the journey they are in. But I like, for me, and maybe that's just because I have a clinical perspective, but for me, I like the focus on the functional piece.
I guess I take a matter-of-fact attitude about that too, and part of what I want to say here is based on an article that Richard Clough wrote in the 1990s that a lot of people got upset about, but the article really was trying to explain why people who had childhood trauma were more prone to be re-abused in later life, domestic violence, getting raped, and so on, than people who didn't have that kind of trauma. And if I remember the gist of the article, what he said was if somebody has, been harmed enough, then they may detach or dissociate from the warning signals that something bad is about to happen. And so they become what he called a sitting duck for getting re-traumatized. So that's one of the risks I see in trying to maintain a plural lifestyle without trying to share connections, perceptions. I mean, it's okay if somebody has parts, but if a part on the outside is not letting the others know that there might be some danger here, so that those gut feelings don't get passed around, then that could be really risky.
Right. I think that's true in a similar, different, but a similar way, even with the podcast or some of the YouTube channels or different things. If we over-identify with that in and of itself, that becomes an expression of it and more of a maladaptive response as opposed to an expression for the process of it or a way to document the process of it. And so that's something we talk about with the husband a lot, of making sure that our focus is that the podcast is an expression and not an identity, and that we're documenting the process, not becoming something that then is ongoing.
That's good. I think that's important. And so many people with abuse histories end up in abuse, getting re-traumatized in their later relationships. And they're unable to pull their resources together because dissociation helped them survive it. So they continue to do it and end up feeling more trapped than they may actually be. And it's just tragic. It's really hard to help somebody to start to make connections inside when their life is dangerous today.
Wow. I appreciate your time today. I would love to talk to you again sometime.
Anytime. I like talking to you as well.
I really learned a lot, and you have a lot of context that really answered some of my questions. I'm even going to have to rewrite some of my keynote there to explain that, because that's really helpful. I appreciate it.
Your conference is on the 29th, right?
The 30th, at the end of the month. I'm not. That's
Yeah.
a time question. It posts on Saturday morning, I think. But I'm doing one on. I'm doing the keynote, and I'm doing a very, very simplified version on polyvagal, and both of mine will be on the podcast.
That's great. I intend to listen to it and some of the other presentations as well. I learned from my clients. I don't have this experience, this inner experience of separateness, except in those very small ways that I mentioned. So I'm not the expert, but my clients are.
Well, I appreciate your receptiveness to me, even as a person.
Why not?
I do. I mean, my own shame issues, yes, but also that cultural wound has caused some separations. And so those of you that have been gracious enough to speak with me on the podcast, I think it's really, really, I mean, I get emails and emails and emails about it, but it's really bringing a lot of healing to the community as a whole and to individuals, and I'm grateful.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to talk and to talk to you. And I really appreciate what you're doing with your podcast, and I'm looking forward to learning more from you.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us with System Speak, a podcast about dissociative identity disorder. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes, or follow along on our website, www.systemspeak.org. Thanks for listening.
By the way, this is supposed to be like a mini comic, but I might just color this part tonight, because for the other panels we were just gonna like change expressions and stuff, and I'm kind of, what do I want to say, I don't want to stream something that may end up being a little tedious. I just like doing the coloring process on stream, so I think I'll do the changing poses and expressions and stuff off stream. I want to play the next episode, but I want to get a drink of water. So I think after I color this, I'll do maybe like 2 or 3 more doodles, and then I might color some Scream. Ah! Oh, hi, Fable! I'm coloring something kind of gay. Fable, I will be right back. that person in Discord. Did you mean Nubia? How she was reacting to your stream? I thought you've seen the Proud Family for some reason. Also, I'm getting really hot. Actually, maybe I will change my shirt to be a short sleeve shirt instead of a long sleeve shirt. I think I think Cuddle's getting flustered from me coloring this. It's so funny. It's like you wanted me to color this, but now that I'm coloring it, you're all embarrassed. You're so silly. Anyway, I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. Yeah, we see these two basically as the Bakudeku of the Proud Family. Even though they like barely have any interaction. It's just like their personalities as individuals feel like that. And their dynamic feels like that when they do interact. Oh, I wanted to say I saw Gravy was sleeping on our plushie of Chuckles. Important update to share. Okay, I will play the next episode. With conference? Oh, she's probably just like... Is this the actual conference? That's so cool! Because maybe it's just Dr. E sharing what she shared at the conference, but I think that's cool when they say, I'm gonna share at the conference, and it's like, oh, okay. But then you get to hear what they shared. It's like, oh, I'm included even though I wasn't there. Thank God for all the cute things on the planet. Oh wait, I gotta show you, and Fuki and whoever else is here that wasn't here before. I gotta show you Mouse. Mouse is in color now. Oh yeah, and I have a hotkey.
Hello, welcome to the keynote address for the Plural Positivity World
Shiny
Conference.
eyes.
While this is a Plural Positivity World Conference, I have been asked specifically to speak about the history of dissociative identity disorder, or DID, as we understand it thus far. We will also be sharing the results from the survey after further data analysis, but we do want to thank everyone for participating, as we have thus far had 223 responses from 27 countries. The history of DID is in almost every book about it, but none of them are exhaustive. While we can review these early cases and the first diagnosis with the multiple personality label, it is wrong to assume that these were the earliest cases or experiences. The case studies given credit for the identification and categorizing are only the first to formally document and label them according to modern science as we understand it now and with records available. It does not mean that these pioneers in treating dissociation invented it, or that these were the first cases of it. It should be assumed that the cases of dissociative identity disorder have been around as long as people and trauma have existed. In her 2019 book, Rachel Robertson reports the history of DID goes back at least 4,000 years. Ancient cultures describe many cases of dissociative identity disorder through their stories and art. Many of these are reframed as demonic possession or misrepresented through westernized and Christianized documents. Some cultures still view their healers and shamans as multiple without it even having any negative connotation, until they were persecuted through genocide by Western religions such as 300 years of the Inquisition. But for the sake of today's discussion, and to answer the questions about why we even need a counter conference, in an appeal to the ISSTD and its conference currently happening in New York this year, we will focus on more recent history and the Western medicine perspective. In 1584, Jeannie Ferry was the first woman to document her own case of multiple personalities, though these words were not yet used as diagnostic labels. Her documentation preserves the early identification of symptoms that correlate with the modern diagnosis, including multiple alters with their own names and identities, lists of their features, and descriptions of their different roles. She described protector personalities, persecutory personalities, and child personalities. These personalities were associated with the different sets of behaviors that ranged from self-harm to helping her heal to disordered eating. They all had their own voices, both when she spoke and inside her head.
Wait. Yeah, I love System Speak. It's good podcast. I just want to pause it to say how funny Color is. We used to see Zoe's like shoes and skirt as being a really ugly green, but then when we realized it's orange, we thought it looked fine. Like what? Either way, it's the same exact color, but it's like your brain processing specific shade. It's like this would be really gross if it were like if it was like a green, but as an orange it's fine. Why is that? I don't know if that makes sense.
They all had different knowledge, capacities, and skill sets. She herself documented that they resulted from childhood abuse. Jeannie Ferry's account in a now ancient text is no different than the modern-day blog, podcast, or YouTube video series. What feels like validated history to an outsider seems very familiar to those of us who are survivors. Those of us who share our stories do it to document our progress and make sense of our experiences, not to garner attention from people already too quick to judge or dismiss us. 10 years after Jeannie Ferry, Paracelsus was born in 1541 and grew up to be a Swiss physician, alchemist, and astrologer of the German Renaissance. He was a pioneer in several aspects of the medical revolution of the Renaissance. He spoke and published about a woman who had amnesia about an alternate personality who stole her money. This feels very reminiscent of the modern-day case study, such as those often shared at clinical or public conferences. In 1623, the story of Sister Benedetta was published. Sister Benedetta was a woman who was supposedly possessed by 3 angelic boys who would beat her to cause chronic pain. When they took control of her body, each would speak with a different dialect and tone of voice while using different facial expressions. Benedetta had amnesia for some of their actions, including a sexual relationship that they had initiated. Like Jeannie Ferry, Sister Benedetta suffered from self-harm and disordered eating. Her parents had also shown signs of dissociation and had been rumored to be possessed, and one of the angels was frozen at age 9, the same age at which Sister Benedetta's father had died. Her symptoms had become uncontrollable, and she had been sent to the convent. Angels were the fictives of the 1600s. Taken from religious texts and cultural experiences and religious beliefs, these characters were apparent alters but in non-human form, much like the dragons and aliens and wolves introjected from modern-day cultural exposure. In 1791, Ebert Gmelin published the first known detailed case study of multiple personality, which he called exchanged personality, in reference to the switching between the 2 or more personalities. The 20-year-old German woman could speak perfect French and speak German with a French accent when she was the French woman, but only knew German when she was the German woman. The French woman knew everything the German woman did, but the German woman didn't know what happened to her while the French woman was out. Eventually, these two could switch intentionally when prompted by him, but only after some time of working together. They could not do so early in their discovery. The judgments for and against this case feel like those that come from harsh clinicians who don't believe in DID, or from cold clinicians behind microphones that don't like that DID looks different from their expertise, or even from the DID community itself, when survivors cruelly compare stories or judge themselves or each other, when in reality they've had different experiences and are in different stages of healing. Benjamin Rush is known as the father of American psychiatry, and was the only signer of both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. He was the chief surgeon of the Continental Army and worked with many children and adults who suffered trauma because of the war. In 1809, he published a 4-volume set of books about treating mind disorders called Medical Inquiries and Observations of the Mind. In these essays, Dr. Rush included the concept of multiple personalities, which he referred to as doubling of consciousness. He reasoned that the cause of this happening in trauma patients was a disconnection between the two hemispheres of the brain. This was our first sign of hope, that the shame of the impact of DID was not entirely ours to carry, and the first validation we received from the neurobiological impact of trauma. In 1811, Samuel Mitchell identified both Mary Reynolds and Rachel Baker as multiple personality patients. The most famous was Mary, whom he first wrote about in 1816, with a description of Mary's symptoms as preaching in her sleep, as well as writing poetry and music. While none of those activities are in and of themselves signs of mental illness, these were unusual behaviors for her and activities she was otherwise unable to do. Dr. Mitchell expanded on this account in 1860 in an article entitled The Strange Case of Mary Reynolds in Harper's New Monthly magazine. In this account, he reported that Mary was born to a devout family in England in 1785. The family later moved to Pennsylvania, and she grew up as a reserved and quiet, melancholy child. Then, explicably, she became blind and deaf for 6 weeks at age 19. 3 months following this, she suddenly forgot things she had learned, even having to relearn how to read and write. No longer a reserved, melancholy child, Dr. Mitchell described her now as a buoyant, witty, fond of company, and a lover of nature. Then, just as inexplicably, she reverted back to her quiet and melancholy self, without memory of either of the other 2 incidents. Dr. Mitchell reported that Mary Reynolds seemed to alternate these 3 identities, with no memory shared between them, for the next 16 years. She then maintained her more excited state until her death at age 61, but still without recall of what she experienced during the other 2 states of consciousness. This was the first case study that described the more functional aspects of multiplicity, that many of the separately developed talents and skills are just as valid and not unusual or maladaptive in and of themselves. In 1840, Antoine Despines published a monograph that documented the story of an 11-year-old Swiss girl, Estelle, who initially presented with paralysis and sensitivity to touch. She later displayed another personality who was quite different, could walk, liked to play, and could not tolerate her mother's presence. Despines documented this treatment course, which he reported cured the child, and many of which treatments are still recognized as valid today. This was the early description of our body memories, of our differing abilities based on the trauma response in the brain and which parts are active, and the connection between the severity of the impact of adverse childhood experiences and chronic pain, illness, and autoimmune disorders. Eugene Azam, a professor of neurology with a large interest in hypnosis, published the most detailed account of multiple personality in the 1800s. The woman, Felida X, had 3 different personalities, and he detailed what they acted like, who they were, and what caused them to appear. Felida X was born in 1843, lost her father in infancy, and had a difficult childhood. She exhibited 3 different personalities, each considering itself to be Felida's normal state and the others to be abnormal. The second personality state first manifested when Felita was 13 years old and suffered none of the physical illnesses that her first personality suffered. Initially, switching was reported to happen almost every day after a pain in the temple in her head and a profound sleep for 2 to 3 minutes, but the frequency of switching decreased over time to the point that it would happen only every 25 to 30 days and lasted only a few hours at a time. The third personality, which appeared only on occasion, suffered from anxiety attacks and hallucinations. At one point, the first personality was pregnant without explanation, and the second personality emerged and took responsibility for the pregnancy. Still, even after a great deal of research into the idea of multiple personalities, people who had symptoms like those of dissociative identity disorder were either seen as having epileptic fits or being possessed. He followed the case for 35 years and published his book about alternating personalities in the Double Consciousness in 1887. This is the early documentation as alters not just presenting as real, but perceiving themselves as real within their own awareness and consciousness. It is documentation of interactions that hint at an inner world with rules and codes and dynamics by which they lived and took turns, whether that was revealed or known or not. It tells the story of explicit switching and passive influence and natural consequences for a shared body. In 1882, the first person officially diagnosed with multiple personality disorder, instead of the previously French diagnosis of double personality, was Louis Auguste Vivet. He had been physically abused and neglected as a child and had frequent attacks of hysteria. One such of these occurred when he was 17 and bitten by a snake. He lost the use of his legs for almost 1 year, and when the use returned after a 50-hour attack, he didn't remember any of the physicians who had been treating him in an asylum for the last month, or any of his fellow patients. His manner, morals, and appetite were different as well. Following additional attacks the next year, his character would change from impulsive and dangerous to calm and gentle. In 1884, he had another attack that left him gentle of manner but unable to walk, and yet another attack returned the use of his legs but left him quarrelsome and inclined to steal as he had done as a child in order to survive. Amnesia for intervals spanning episodes was noted. By 1888, he had been recorded as having 10 personality states, each of which were different in character, memory, and somatic symptoms. This case study tells the story of individual alters, followed and observed over long periods of time, detailing their individuality, their reality, and even their humanity. This was not the delusion of one dominant personality creating lesser ones. This was a group of distinct insiders sharing a body and taking turns fronting. In 1918, multiple personalities were first acknowledged in the predecessor of the DSM under hysterical psychoneurosis, a subgroup of psychoneuroses and neuroses that included alternate states of consciousness acting on normally unknown desires, amnesia, and sensory and motor disturbances. In 1919, Pierre Genet published his work, which included several detailed accounts of multiple personalities. One was the story of Leonie, a poor and mundane woman trapped in married life. When Genet began hypnotic regression, she underwent an unprecedented metamorphosis into a lively, boisterous, and sarcastic woman who emphatically repudiated all association with the normative stream of consciousness. As if having escaped her prison, the second personality evoked her quick-wittedness and intellectual superiority and claimed biological and psychological independence from the first. Her argument rested on the internal perspective that the cerebral chasm separating the two was far too great to assume that they were one and the same person. She even said that her children belonged to her, but that the husband was a complete stranger. In time, a third personality materialized, and she was far more narcissistic and pejorative, even referring to the first personality as a good and stupid woman, but not me, and the second as a crazy creature. After 7 months of working with her, Genet realized that the fragmented personality system resembled an actualized hierarchy. The third alter knew about the second and the second only about the first, and the first was completely oblivious to the existence of the others.
She appeared to have 3 or more personality states, including a child alter named after her childhood name. In the case of Lucy, who also reported to have 3 personality states, there was an alter personality named Adrian who would seem to experience flashbacks of a traumatic childhood event. In the case of Rose, she would suffer from a variety of states, in which some of them she was even paralyzed and in others she was able to walk.
Crazy creature.
Genet wrote extensively about traumatic memories and how these memories could be subdivided and so cause functional loss, but also cause sensory, motor, and perceptual changes. From these changes in sensory experiences, functioning, and perception, he proposed that the mind could then present alternate personalities that were secondary to the first, much like dreams might replay themes throughout the day. He documented how, in several cases, some subpersonalities shared memories and experiences while others did not. He was also the first to explore which personalities got to drive the body, like fronting, and why. He was also the first to propose that the severity of fragmentation depended on the depth of traumatization, an idea which still prevails today. In 1906, Morton Prince published the Christine Beauchamp case in the Dissociation of a Personality. She allegedly had 3 personality states, including one calling herself Sally, who was childlike. Sally differed greatly from a very regressed alter called Idiot. Prince wrote about the case in a paper of the Journal of Abnormal Psychology, which was the most quoted reference in the history of the illness. After this documentation, however, no further mention of multiple personalities was mentioned in the journal until Prince's published famous account of Christine Costner Sizemore. In 1957, the case was made into a film starring Joanne Woodward playing the role of the 3 Faces of Eve. It wasn't until Confusion of Tongues in 1932 that dissociation and subsequent splitting of the personality were explicitly linked to childhood abuse. However, at the time, any theory involving the subconscious mind was unpopular, and few paid attention to what had been discovered and what Jeannie Ferry herself had written all the way back in 1584. There is then an unusual gap in the literature, following Stengel's famous statement in 1943 that the condition was extinct. This statement is often used to explain the gap in literature, and the poor presentation of the article and misapplication of the conclusion confused many who misunderstood the article to mean that the condition was no longer studied or believed to happen as previously documented for over 400 years.
Yeah, like wait, I was like, I feel like my initial reaction is like, no, that's so mean. Don't call yourself an idiot. Like I was almost shocked that an alter would name themselves that, but I could also kind of see it because I think it's kind of like using its pronouns where when you first hear about it, it sounds dehumanizing, but it's actually not that way at all. I think it's like it depends on how the person views it. Like I could see calling yourself idiot to like if people call you idiot a lot and you want to like make light of it and not care so much like that, I could see that being okay. But if you're calling yourself idiot because you genuinely like think you're really stupid and like, you know, like I could see it being a good or a bad thing depending on how you view it. I think that's interesting.
This is entirely false and not the point of his article. It is true that the article was published during the transition between the French-speaking psychiatry and German-speaking psychiatry and the development of English-speaking psychiatry as its own field. But also, when Stengel wrote about the dissociation, he was referring to the external version, fugues, and the internal version, multiple personality. Further, the 1970s also offered the first workshops and trainings for how to treat multiple personalities. Pioneers in the field, such as Dr. Wilbur of Sybil fame, Ralph Allison, and David Call, developed programs and treatment workshops to teach other clinicians how to recognize, diagnose, and treat the condition, which naturally led to an increase in the number of cases diagnosed and reported once treatment for it became available. In 1980, this work culminated in the publication of the DSM-3 by the American Psychiatric Association, which for the first time created a separate category with the term dissociative being first introduced as its own class of disorders. It also officially set forth the criteria for a diagnosis of multiple personality disorder. When the DSM-3R was released, the essential feature of dissociative disorders was officially a disturbance in the normally integrative functions of identity, memory, or consciousness. Landmark publications quickly followed, including E.L. Bliss's study of 14 patients, P.M. Kuhn's systematic treatment of making a diagnosis, G.B. Greaves' classic review article, B.G. Braun's treatment recommendations, and S.S. Marmer's psychoanalytic study. Frank W. Putnam of the National Institute of Mental Health published the classic Diagnosis and Treatment of Multiple Personality Disorder, which was quickly followed by the research of Colin Ross in Multiple Personality Disorder, Diagnosis, Clinical Features, and Treatment. In 1994, the DSM-4 was released, changing the name of multiple personality disorder officially to dissociative identity disorder. The criteria for dissociative identity disorder was now the presence of two or more distinct identities or personality states, each with its own relatively enduring pattern of perceiving, relating to, and thinking about the environment and self. At least two of these identities or personalities.
That's cool that DID as a term is that old. It's almost 30 years old. But then why? I mean, I know why. But why is it only just in recent years that people even know, like, have been starting to use the term if it's existed that long? That's so annoying.
States recurrently taking control of the person's behavior. Inability to recall important personal information that is too extensive to be explained by ordinary forgetfulness. And this disturbance is not due to direct physiological effects of a substance, such as alcohol or drugs, or a result of a general medical condition, such as seizures. The DSM-5 changed this definition in 2013 to allow for self-reporting of symptoms and to specify that amnesia may occur in regards to everyday events and not just traumatic ones. 1994 also saw the International Society for the Study of Dissociation, the ISSTD, release their 100-page document, Guidelines for Treating Dissociative Identity Disorder in Adults. Screening instruments, structured interviews and assessments, and specialized mental status examinations quickly followed. While not the most authoritative, obviously, Wikipedia explains the history of the ISST most succinctly. The focus of the organization has broadened over the years. In the 1980s, the ISSMP&D, the International Society for the Study of Multiple Personality and Dissociation, grouped clinicians and researchers primarily interested in multiple personality disorder. Dissociative identity disorder had been called MPD since the 19th century and was still called MPD in DSM-2 and DSM-3. In the 1990s, DSM-4 changed the name of MPD to DID, and so the ISSMP&D simplified its name to the ISSD, the International Society for the Study of Dissociation, broadening its interest to include other dissociative disorders. By the 21st century, the ISSD had broadened its interest to include chronic developmental traumatic disorders, also known as complex PTSD, and so the name was lengthened to the ISSTD, the International Society for the Study of Trauma and Dissociation. Editors of the book Dissociation and the Dissociative Disorders, DSM-5 and Beyond, described the ISSTD as the principal professional organization devoted to dissociation. As such, the ISSTD revised their treatment guidelines for adults with dissociative disorders in 2011. This was the third revision, and it was published in the Journal of Trauma and Dissociation. It includes 15 pages of references, leaving the guidelines themselves at 56 pages long. The most recent theory of dissociation came from the Netherlands and has come to be called the structural dissociation theory, published in 2006. This will be discussed later in the conference more in depth, but essentially proposes that all children are born with an identity or personality that is structured with separate states, and that it is through attunement and caregiving and being raised in a healthy and safe environment by positive caregivers with good attachment that these states are integrated into one person in normal development. However, with abuse or neglect or other severe misattunement experiences, these states do not get to integrate into one personality and instead remain dissociated or separated from each other. This is a shift from the dissociation theory of the 80s and 90s that viewed the separate personality states or alters as having split off from a core personality and needing to be integrated back into that core. While some dissociative systems may still have one who views themselves or is viewed by the others as a kind of core, or some systems may have a primary personality who identifies with the body and age and even host, fronting the most often. With structural dissociation, even these would be considered alters as well, rather than some unbroken piece from which the others were derived. Besides being the first developmental model of how dissociative disorder occurs, it also clarified several issues. One is that serious and significant trauma prior to the age of 6 is more likely to develop into a trauma response like dissociative identity disorder, while serious and significant trauma after age 9 is more likely to develop into a personality disorder. These may overlap in presentation, and the structural dissociation model explains this by labeling different internal parts as A and P, apparently normal parts, or as EP, emotional parts. There may or may not be amnesia between these parts, and the degree of amnesia correlates to the specific diagnosis along the dissociative spectrum. Another explanation that came out of this model was the idea of how different dissociative systems are organized based on the type of trauma response. For example, an adult who dissociates in response to one traumatic event in adulthood may separate themselves from the memory or emotional response to that event. On the other hand, an adult who had a series of traumatic events may have multiple separations of memories or emotional responses to those events. And then an adult who grew up with ongoing abuse and repeated traumatic events, while also being unable to integrate ego states during childhood development, may have several presenting adults as well as the multiple emotional states. There are diagrams on the blog at systemspeak.org to help with understanding. Kathy Steele, international speaker on dissociative disorders and one of the founders of the structural dissociation theory, rejects the ANP and EP terms in favor of her own model. She uses DL for daily living parts for ANPs and TF for trauma fixated parts for EPs. The other big research getting a lot of attention in the field of dissociative disorders is the polyvagal theory, which will also be discussed in future sessions of this conference. The vagus is a nerve that runs from the brain to all the major organs by branching out along the way, and thus called the polyvagal nerve. We will talk about this more in depth in the session about this topic, but for now, there are two things to know about this theory. One is that it helps explains why bottom-up approaches help survivors of trauma so much. Bottom-up means working with the body itself through a variety of ways to help the amygdala regulate the physiologic response to trauma, even trauma in memory time being felt in now time. So bottom-up approaches are things like meditation, yoga, EMDR, pet therapy, equine therapy, sand tray, art, sensory therapies, as opposed to top-down approaches like talk therapy that work through activating the medial prefrontal cortex. The best and most effective is a bit of both top-down and bottom-up. The other thing that this theory brought to light is that healing from trauma and shame require a social aspect to the therapeutic approach. Healing requires connection with another. There has been an understanding that emotional safety is part of creating the space in which the therapeutic work can happen and progress be made. But now that emotional safety is defined as including attunement specifically. Attunement is being in tune with and reflected by another, being heard, being seen, feeling held in someone's heart, and there being some level of reciprocity. But here's the funny thing about the polyvagal theory being all the rage right now. It isn't new. It's not new at all. Stephen Porges introduced the idea all the way back in 1994. That brings us to another piece of history that matters: changes in the National Institute of Mental Health in the United States for funding research. The change started in 2010 with the From Discovery to Cure report, which basically stated that the traditional research with traditional clinical trials and decades of follow-up research was simply too costly. They simply stopped funding psychological and psychosocial research, period. Starting in 2014, they cut off all of those projects and now only fund neuroscience research. This did two things. First, it shifted funding back to biological and neurological research. This is why some of the brilliant psychological researchers of the 80s and 90s suddenly disappeared or started publishing in other fields. They simply lost funding. It's also why we saw a resurgence of research with things like the polyvagal theory, which was biological enough to count for funding, as well as a new focus on new technology like functional MRIs and neurofeedback. The second thing it did was create opportunity for new people wanting fresh money now made available. The buzzword became evidence-based, which was a way to tie research back to science rather than psychological studies and experiments. At its best, that gave us some new techniques that have been really helpful and widely accepted. And at its worst, it began a pattern for repackaged fad therapies being branded and marketed as the latest thing and evidence-based, but not actually including appropriate application or sample sizes or well-developed studies.
Naughty here.
This has divided clinicians into two camps of thought, often with heated exchanges between them. One camp is the traditional therapies camp, who thinks the other group is simply out to make money from the funding and from clients by coming up with miracle cures that are short-term and fast-acting treatments, but don't actually have any long-term studies backing them up. The other camp is the new short-term therapies camp, who thinks the first group are the ones just trying to make money off of long-term treatments. Stuck in the middle are survivors themselves, either doubting or buying into these different treatments without really knowing what is best or how to even tell which approaches are best for them. In addition, Susan Peace Bannett points out trauma studies cannot be evidence-based by the very nature of trauma. Evidence-based therapies are only studied for an average of 6 to 9 months because, remember, long-term studies lost funding. Extensive trauma histories will take longer than that to build enough safety and connection to even start disclosing trauma. Further, she also points out that trauma is often triggered by anniversary dates or external factors, so many issues may not even come up for a whole year into treatment. This is not only bad practice, but also an injustice for the client, when poorly studied and barely tested models are being applied to trauma treatment for survivors who have already endured so much. But not only do treatments change, the diagnosis itself continues to change. The upcoming release of the ISD-11 will classify dissociative identity disorder as being characterized by the disruption of identity in which there are two or more distinct personality states, dissociative identities, associated with marked discontinuities in the sense of self and agency. Each personality state includes its own pattern of experiencing, perceiving, conceiving, and relating to the self, the body, and the environment. At least 2 distinct personality states recurrently take executive control of the individual's consciousness and functioning in interacting with others or with the environment, such as the performance of specific aspects of daily life, such as parenting or work, or in response to specific situations, such as those that are perceived as threatening. Changes in personality state are accompanied by related alterations in sensations, perception, affect, cognition, memory, motor control, and behavior. There are typically episodes of amnesia which may be severe. The symptoms are not only better explained by another mental, behavioral, or neurodevelopmental disorder, and are not due to the direct effects of substance or medication on the central nervous system, including withdrawal effects, and are not due to a disease of the nervous system or a sleep-wake disorder. The symptoms result in significant impairment in personal, family, social, educational, occupational, or other areas of functioning. We'll also be adding a partial dissociative identity disorder diagnosis, presumably to replace OSDD. This diagnosis also contains new language regarding switching ANP to EP as a dissociative intrusion. It also refers to passive influence, or the influence of other alters without them presenting directly or fronting completely or co-consciously. While not yet confirmed, it appears, based on common interpretation thus far, that this distinguishes secondary dissociation as PDD, previously OSDD, and now partial dissociative identity disorder, and tertiary dissociation as DID explicitly. The ISD-11 will also shift fugue to a general dissociative amnesia category. Despite the release of the DSM-5 2 years later in 2013, the upcoming release of the ISD-11, the latest theory of structural dissociation, and the renewed emphasis on the polyvagal theory, the ISSTD still has not updated its guidelines since 2011, and even that update did not include any references or research past 2009, making their treatment guidelines outdated by an entire decade. Our specific concerns in regards to this include the language of using the word patients instead of clients, the diagnostic manual changes, and the need for functional multiplicity to be included as a treatment option. However, last week I spoke to Peter Barish, who helped write the treatment guidelines for the ISSTD, and asked him these questions directly. He responded in several helpful ways to communicate and explain the ISSTD stance on this issue. The following is my understanding of his response. I am not quoting him directly, and you may listen to that podcast episode to hear him speak in his own words. Most of the original treatment providers were medical doctors or psychiatrists, and the original context of the treatment guidelines were for insurance panels approving inpatient hospital stays. In these contexts, using the word patients was the appropriate use of the word, which I concur based on my own years of working in hospitals and residential treatment programs. The Latin roots for the word clients means to lean on, which ultimately made both clinicians and survivors uncomfortable with the use of that word, and so patients remained the better option out of those choices. The changes brought about by the DSM-5 were not the expected changes. It was expected that the developmental trauma disorder, or complex PTSD, would be added as a diagnosis, and it wasn't. This chain of events is described well in the book The Body Keeps Score. What did change in the DSM-5 was self-reporting symptoms becoming acceptable, and DD-NOS becoming OSDD. However, neither of these changes impacted treatment itself directly, and so did not require an update to the guidelines. Functional multiplicity happens naturally already in the treatment process as communication and cooperation improve as a system. In that way, most ethical and good therapists already understand this as a goal for part of treatment, even if it is not explicitly stated in the guidelines. It should be expected that we attain this part of treatment process naturally, both through treatment itself and through our own work as a system that we do outside of or in addition to the treatment setting. That said, functional multiplicity is not an end goal for treatment for two reasons, both of which are related to the ACEs research and long-term follow-up studies, which are new for the first time and were not available in the 80s and 90s. The first reason is that it leaves a survivor at a higher risk of being re-traumatized or re-victimized in some way, not because the survivor is not functioning with a positive quality of life, but because they remain in a dissociated state, which leaves them, by definition, with decreased awareness of themselves and their surroundings in some ways. The second reason builds on that, in regards to both the liability and the ethics of leaving a client in that high-risk state in a more vulnerable position. Thus, from a perspective of beginning a conversation between the clinical and survivor communities about these issues, the survivor community is concerned about agency, the ability to choose, and intentionality, the choice itself, while the clinical community is concerned about the safety and increased adaptability rather than continuing to rely only on dissociation. Survivors seem to voice an opinion that is in regards to the quality of life and wanting to measure their own progress, while clinicians are expressing concerns regarding what would put that quality of life at risk. While there are clearly differences of opinions in these perspectives, the biggest trigger for survivors may simply be facing the "we know what's good for you" approach that feels generally oppressive despite its reportedly good intentions. This may be what is more difficult to resolve than the differences themselves. Clinicians will need to find sensitive and respectful means to support the survivor during later phases of therapy, including ways to honor both agency and intentionality as part of the healing process. Survivors will need to continue to advocate for themselves in ways that are effective, while also continuing to engage in the therapeutic process. Finally, the latest research continues to be in neuroscience because it can get funding, and much of it is focusing on what we are learning from functional MRIs. The first MRI with documented switching was all the way back in 1999. But just a few months ago, in December of last year, the British Journal of Psychiatry released spectacular results on the fMRI study.
Sorry, I gotta catch up. So glad to be plural in the present and having any clue what is going on. Yeah! I think, she was talking about functional multiplicity, and I think that did not include being co-conscious, because she was saying, like, that should not be, they don't want that as an end goal, but I think that's a good end goal, but I think she was not including being co-conscious in there, because she was saying how if the wrong person is running and, like, the person who has good experience with a situation can't get to the front to warn them, then that's not good. But yeah, I love being co-conscious. I think that is better end goal than, what do you call it, when you integrate, but I don't want to judge people who do want to integrate. But I think it's sad to think of not having your friends around anymore. Managed versus unmanaged co-conscious should be specified, yeah. Imagine you're plural in BC, and everyone thinks you're possessed by 10 demons. I don't know why when you said BC, I thought British Columbia. I think because we used to have a friend that lived there, so that's what my brain defaulted to. There's just demons roaming around in Canada. Well, I guess I can't stop doodling because Fuki said never stop. So this is gonna be a first infinity stream.
Neuroscience News reported that fMRIs were able to distinguish with 73% accuracy neurobiological differences between those with dissociative identity disorder and those without the condition. They wrote, "This research, using the largest ever sample of individuals with DID in a brain imaging study, is the first to demonstrate that individuals with DID can be distinguished from healthy individuals on the basis of their brain structure."
I think I might just go until this episode is over, which is in about 20 minutes, because headache's starting to come back a little that we had earlier, and yeah. Sorry, it's a little shorter than normal, but I'm really happy about coloring Mouse.
DID,
and
formerly
Nubia
known as
Zoey
multiple personality disorder, is one of the most disputed and controversial mental health disorders, with serious problems around underdiagnosis and misdiagnosis. Many patients with DID share a history of misdiagnoses, inefficient pharmacological treatment, and several hospitalizations. Commenting on the research, Dr. Render said, "DID diagnosis is controversial, and individuals with DID are often misdiagnosed from the moment of seeking treatment for symptoms to the time of an accurate diagnosis of DID. Individuals receive an average of 4 misdiagnoses and spend 7 years in mental health services. The findings of our present study are important because they provide the first evidence of a biological basis for distinguishing between individuals with DID and healthy individuals. Ultimately, the application of pattern recognition techniques could prevent unnecessary suffering through earlier and more accurate diagnosis, facilitating faster and more targeted therapeutic interventions. Further, using what has been learned from polyvagal theory, shame theory, and structural dissociation theory, there is renewed interest in the actual neurobiological mechanisms of how DID develops. Some of this also builds on fMRIs, where brain structural changes are noted. In DID, reduced volumes in the amygdala and hippocampus and parahippocampus were found. Smaller hippocampal volumes may be related to early life trauma. The hippocampus has a high density of receptors and is highly sensitive to a heightened release of the stress hormone cortisol. Therefore, chronic traumatic stress may lead to cell damage in this area. Reduced hippocampal volumes in PTSD may therefore stem from a history of trauma rather than be specific to the diagnosis. Building on this, there is a coalescence theory that explains how the structure of DID happens neurophysiologically. This theory links default mode network, DMN, to both default mechanisms and altered states of consciousness. The DMN is a group of interactive brain regions whose activity is highly correlated, meaning they all work together at once. Bouncing back from earlier criticism, the DMN has now been mapped not only on fMRIs, but also PET scans and electrocorticography. The DMN is most active during wakeful rest, such as daydreaming, mind-wandering, and dissociation. Thanks to recent fMRI research, we now know the DMN also contributes to aspects of experiencing one's role externally, as well as the ability to think about ourselves and remember the past. In the infant brain, there is limited evidence of the default network, but default network connectivity is more consistent in children aged 9 to 12 years, suggesting that the default network undergoes developmental change. This seems to confirm theories about extreme trauma responses prior to age 9 developing as DID, and trauma responses after age 9 developing as personality disorders. There are many differences amongst us in the community. DID presents differently in everyone, and is experienced differently by everyone. Some of us have been working at our healing for many years, while others of us are just getting started. Still others don't remember trauma, while others deny having any trauma background at all. Sometimes our awareness changes simply depending on who is out. But today, this weekend, at this first counter conference, we unite together to use our voice in a way like never before. We stand together against being silenced by clinicians who are neither properly educated nor properly trained. We stand together against being silenced by government funding agencies who ignore our declarations that they have long been a part of the problem and in some cases caused the problem. We stand together against being silenced by dissension in research camps where politics argue over money like fighting parents, and where funding unethically determines the access to services, and where clinical pirates reproduce old research for credit and money at the expense of our healing being put on hold for decades. We raise our voices to say, nothing for us without us.
Just like,
This was our discussion at the recent Infinite Mind Conference in Florida, when 15 plural systems met together over several days that weekend to discuss concerns experienced while at the conference. Sign language interpreters were refused, and alternative handouts and transcripts promised were never provided, and the videos used, like the ones on the ISSTD website also, were not captioned, despite that being federal law as well for years now, altogether making the conference inaccessible to deaf and hard of hearing survivors. Seeing Eye Dogs were twice kicked out of the conference, and PowerPoint presentations did not include image descriptions, making the conference inaccessible to the blind and visually impaired survivors in attendance. Following these slights and legal violations against the disability community, that conference organizer was asked to present about disability and trauma at the ISSTD conference this weekend, rather than someone from the disability community themselves, which again is cultural appropriation. Presenters also openly mocked animal, feral, fictive, and alien alters during their presentations, despite redirection by survivors themselves that the appropriate term for these are non-human alters, and without consideration that any such introjects would have developed in the minds of intelligent and creative children based on their own unique traumatic experiences, as well as their own specific cultural references growing up in the 90s and 2000s, which provides a very different presentation than those who grew up in the 60s and 70s and 80s, but makes them no less legitimate. Presenters continue to follow the ISSTD treatment guidelines, which state that survivors ought to be isolated from each other with no contact outside of group, and present themselves as both dismissive and disrespectful to those who attempt to educate and connect and support other survivors. And presenters and organizations are attempting to aggregate and monetize online educational resources, which is again unethical appropriation, and worse, feels like organizational abuse, which many of us have already endured as our call for information and access and connection is dismissed, while they then take control of disseminating information and resources while excluding those of us who have been doing it already for years. This is not 1980. It's been more than 40 years since 1980. More than half of your survivors were barely even born in 1980. DID is not going to look the same, sound the same, or present the same now as it did in 1980 because those clients grew up in the 40s and 50s and 60s. The cause may be the same, and the process may be the same, but the presentation comes in a whole new generation, 4 decades later. Introjects look different, persecutors look different, and inner worlds look different. That doesn't make any of it less valid, and it is cruel and re-traumatizing for anyone to dismiss survivors because the culture we grew up in and had access to during childhood and adolescence was different than it was almost 100 years ago. It is 2019. More than half of us grew up in the 80s and 90s and 2000s and 2010s. It is the digital world, and you cannot keep us isolated from each other. We no longer grow up in a world never having met someone like us. DID is everywhere. It is misportrayed in mass media, misunderstood by pop culture, and misrepresented by old text and outdated treatment models. We are survivors, keen on discernment and gifted with hypervigilance. We grew up in the digital age, and we know that not everything on YouTube is true, and not every DID channel is real. We know that there is a difference between those who share their stories online in helpful and educated ways and those who fake it for clickbait and quick money. We know that some support groups on Facebook will be healthy peer support like no other place available to us, while others are nasty pools of trauma dumping. We know that Twitter and Reddit and Tumblr can be opportunities for connection and education and advocacy, or places of terrifying drama and cyberbullying. We already know these things, and most of us can discern the difference. Stand with us instead of leaving us alone in it. Collaborate instead of letting us drown on our own. Teach us instead of dismissing us. Empower us to heal even through connection and attunement, which is exactly the message of all the latest research on shame. We are just asking you to see us and hear us, and to please not become the bad guys. We agree with the concern of a person or system or part of a system over-identifying with their role online, rather than progression through the healing journey. So support us as we focus on the healing aspects, such as communication, cooperation, and collaboration, inside and outside the system. These issues are not only the modern age of clinical cultural competence, but also an opportunity for compassion. This is what led us to organize this counter conference, intentionally timing it simultaneously with the ISSTD conference happening this weekend in New York. Let me be clear, we are not protesting that conference, nor are we arguing against the ISSTD. We declare our legal rights for accessible treatments and trainings, as well as our ethical right to culturally competent treatment for these new generations. And some of the issues we would like addressed by the clinical community include the following. The decade-old treatment guidelines by the ISSTD need to be updated, such as patients should be changed to clients. And while we now understand their origin better, it has been decades since hospitals were closed, and we are not a generation that grew up in patient, and client has a more modern feel despite its unfortunate Latin roots. Research should also be updated, terminology for non-human alters clarified, functional multiplicity included as a viable and valid treatment outcome, or at least acknowledged as part of the process, and using other language such as metabolizing experiences rather than integrating them. Now the integration has such a negative connotation that it's actually become triggering verbiage in and of itself. While we understand the difficulty with parts language and the need for emphasis on the functional whole, and we do even agree that the term emotional parts is severely limited, trauma-fixated parts is not a valid replacement for the EP term due to the interference of intentionality. It implies blame, which is shaming, and those parts stuck in time or trauma loops are not the same as fixating on that trauma, nor is it helpful for those parts to be shamed further for their experience. The general attitude regarding survivors having contact with each other needs to change, especially in regards to the online community. For years, we have been isolated from each other, and it was recommended we not have contact with one another. There is no other physical or mental illness given those recommendations. All other physical and mental illnesses include treatment recommendations for support groups and communities of others who understand, which is consistent with the most recent research on attunement and shame and healing through connection. We understand that isolating only within that group is not healthy, as mentioned under Safety and Reciprocity subheading in Chapter 5 of The Body Keeps Score. But these generations growing up online anyway cannot be expected not to reach out and find others who understand them, and it is culturally incompetent to expect that. What would be more helpful would be supporting those who are trying to do it well and providing safe places and disseminating accurate information as best they can to so many desperate for resources. We know not everything on the internet is true or real or even safe, and we are probably better at spotting abusers. Let us have our safe places in which we can rest and connect with others who understand.
Oh, I'm glad you like the podcast. I just had a thought. I think after this one, I'm gonna go back to one we already listened to. I think during our Demon Turf Tower playing, cause I really love John Mark. He's my favorite. I like Dr. E, but sometimes I like zone out because it's so smart sometimes. And but I feel like the summary she's doing right now is like making it all make more sense.
When you have those rare occasions of those who copycat others that they witness online, then treat them as you would any other introject, just like from a parenting figure or a book. This generation of introjects is digitally based and very different presentation than those 20 years ago or 40 years ago. It doesn't make them less real or less valid or less important. We know, in differing degrees, but especially once we have been in therapy, that we are parts of a whole. Please interact with us as we present, just like you would for any other client. There are reasons why we function that way as a system, and listening to us will help you understand us more and help us trust you more quickly. Please stop referring to working with individual parts as joining the delusion. Dissociation is not the same as a delusion, and it is oppressive and shaming when you say so, which is a rupture to our connection with you. Emphasize more in your education and trainings and publications that healing is a journey. Kathy Steele said that integration is not a fixed moment, but a process, and no different for you than for us, other than our dissociated starting place. You aren't finished either, so have some empathy for us and compassion for our struggle with the process. None of us are the same person we were yesterday. Metabolizing experiences, feelings, and memories should be the focus of therapeutic work, along with the safety and stabilization, including sensory motor and physical grounding work, as well as compassion and connection to address shame issues. This is what brings about functional multiplicity and proves both internal and external communication, cooperation, and collaboration.
Peter Barish told me that David Cowell said, "It seems to me that after treatment, you want a functional unit, be it a corporation, a partnership, or a one-owner business."
How have you been?
We stand with those clinicians who see us and hear us and treat us ethically and compassionately. We stand with those clinicians who do their own work enough not to be offended by the cultural shifts and dissociative presentations, the expression of DID in younger generations with different cultural experiences to draw on as they dissociate, and new styles of interjects based on global access to digital literature. We stand with those clinicians who are receptive to feedback, who share the reins with new and qualified colleagues, and who collaborate with the community as a whole, and not just the professional world as a place to hide or establish power over those already victimized. We stand with those organizations who respond to feedback, who include survivors on their boards and advisory panels, and who support fresh ideas for connection and healing instead of dividing the community further. And we are calling for a renewal, to reclaim our healing environment from the last 20 years, and pleading for a bridge to be built between the clinical and survivor communities. We don't need you to be magic. We don't need you to integrate us into one. We have never asked for any of that. Some may choose it, but it ought not be forced on any of us. We want to be safe. We want to feel connected. We want to be able to function and have access to all parts or aspects of our lives. Plurality doesn't bother us. We've always been this way. It takes ages to get diagnosed and even longer to find a good therapist and even longer to get well. Being plural isn't even the hard part about DID. What bothers us is the getting hurt and the not knowing and the shame. And when you stop and think about the current DSM-5 criteria, dissociative identity disorder is only a disorder when you're distressed by it and can't function. Help us not to be so distressed. Help us function. Then we won't be disordered. We can handle the rest. There's a lot of positivity about being plural.
Thank you for joining us with System Speak, a podcast about dissociative identity disorder. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes, or follow along on our website, www.systemspeak.org. Thanks for listening.
Okay, I want to play this really cute podcast that John Mark did, who is a 12-year-old alter. He's so funny. He's like a lot of our favorites. Where is it? I gotta scroll down again. Oh yeah, the doodle I'm coloring right now or drawing is Harmony and True Heart Bear doing a Care Bear stare, but Harmony isn't a Care Bear, so so I'm just drawing Harmony being like alarmed at True Heart Bear's Care Bear stare.
Okay guys, I know it's not my turn, but I gotta tell you some things. Because I want to go for a walk. So last night, I was looking around, exploring. I find my hotel around. I find where everything is. And then I went outside because I need some fresh air and I want to know where we can play. And so what I do, I found the swimming pool and the playground and the tennis courts and the lake. And I walked around the lake because when you're from Oklahoma and when you're from Kansas, you need a lake like a camel needs water. And you go there and cool off and play. And you can explore in the river and the lake, and you can have adventures there and play there. So I was really excited because it says Lake Buena Vista, and that means good. So a lake that's good, well, I'm excited for that and I want to play there. So I waited, and last night was a hard day, so we had a lot of trouble going to sleep. Like it was after 1 o'clock in the morning before we went to sleep. But Dr. E gets up at like 3 or 4 to do her work. And our hotel room is like right under the stairs. So we can't get our internet in there. So we had to work in the lobby. And that worked because nobody was there. But then everyone started waking up. And that was hard. But then she finished, so it was okay. And I still did not buy no donuts big as my face. I didn't. I did not even get hot chocolate. I didn't buy nothing. I just had my cereal in my room like a good kid. I follow the rules. Even though those donuts are big as my face. But when she finished work, I know it's my turn to play. And we got to exercise. And them girls can go work on the treadmill or the things, the machines. And I can do some weights and be strong. But we're at a lake. Like, and it's a good lake. And we're in an airport all day yesterday and it was so hard. So I thought maybe we can get some fresh air and have a nice walk and be really happy of it. And it's so green and it's so pretty here because we cannot play outside at home because it's so cold and snowing. And I got some snow boots, but, well, I'm excited to have a day off and just playing and resting, so I want to go play outside. And last night, I walked all around the lake and the trees, and there's a magnolia tree here. And you know what a magnolia tree here is good for? It's good for climbing. So I climbed up in the tree for a while, and I played in the tree. But then there came some workers, and them workers are pulling weeds and they're cleaning up them flower beds because they want that vista to be buena. And so they're working, and so I didn't want to get in trouble for being in a tree, so I got down from that tree in a hurry. But then I just want to go on a walk. So I walked out the hotel all the way down the street. But then at the end of the street says Disney Springs. Well, it's just right there by the stoplight, and I'm not going there. I don't want to go there because it's loud. Our friend said it's really loud there, so that's the opposite of where I want to go. Also, Disney. No, thank you. Keep walking. So I turned around and I went the other way, and there's just more hotels, but they got palm trees. And you know what palm trees are good for? Dates. I don't mean the kissing kind. I mean the eating kind. I like some dates, but I can't find none, so I tried. I looked and looked for dates,
Because do you know dates are really healthy? I need dates. Dates have every vitamin things that you need. They can be some nutrition. And I looked, but I don't see no dates. Maybe you can buy them in the Disney store, but I don't want no Disney dates. Well, so then I decided I can't even find no dates, so I'll just go play at the lake and I'll go exploring because it's a beautiful morning. Well, it's a little cloudy, so I wish I can see the sun. That would make me very, very, very happy because we love some sunshine, but it's still warmer than at home, so I don't even have a sweater on because it feels so good. But I'm just walking and I'm playing in the trees and I'm looking under there and exploring because there's all these like little caves at the bottom of the trees. I mean, it's like a forest around the lake. I don't know what that was. Did you hear it? It scared me to death. Anyway, so all around the lake are these very tall trees and also palm trees too, but also other kinds of trees, so it's really thick. And at the bottom is like brush, like you know, like a forest or something, like a jungle maybe, like a tropical jungle. And down at the bottom of the trees where the brush is, sometimes there's like little hidey holes in there, and I want to go exploring in there. And I was looking around and I could fit in some of them, and I was playing and I was trying to look for ducks and things. And so I was just walking all around the lake, and then you will not believe what happened. I'm not even making this up. There's a big old sign right there, and you know what that sign says? It says don't come here or play here because there's alligators. Alligators, you guys. Nobody told me there's alligators, and I'm playing in the lake gonna get eaten by alligators because I just want to come play here. I do not want to be that person that comes to play at the lake and get swallowed up by an alligator. That's not part of my plan. So that worried me a little bit, and I hightail it out there. But I still want to walk. So now I'm walking on the tennis court, which is not near as fun as exploring in the woods. It's not at all, but at least it's outside, and it's got fence around it. So now I have a cage protecting me from the alligators. Except here's the problem. I'm the one inside the cage. That's not fair. It's not how my days plan at all. And I think we're just a little cranky pants from have a hard day and not get enough sleep. So I'm gonna finish this walk and we need a nap. But then after our nap, we're gonna make some choices. Because here is the thing. There is some people from them groups that those girls like of our friends who are going to be getting together like a party before Dr. E conference start. Now here's what I'm thinking about that. I'm thinking, well, it sounds like a good idea and pretty fun for making friends. Oops. But I got some concerns about it. One thing is that if they find you, they can't unfind you. So some of them I know are safe, but I don't know if all of them are safe. And I don't know how to be just friends with some of them if it's at a party. And also, what if I get scared and that's embarrassing? Or if them girls panic. So I just have not decided. I don't know if we can go. We gotta talk about it some more. Maybe we can go. Maybe we cannot go. We still don't know, but maybe we need a nap first. I'm not going to a party. Well, except sometimes at a party they got snacks. Or maybe I could buy a snack like a donut as big as my face. But I don't want to get a donut because I don't want to get in trouble. And I want to make good choices. But also, I found a microwave for heating up my lunch. So we brought our food. I packed it all up for we can have a budget and be really smart about it. Because I'm stinking smart. Except about alligators. That was not stinking smart. That was just stinking. Them alligators try to eat me. I'm just here to play. I'm a guest in these parts. They gotta be nice to me. I don't know if I can do a party. Makes me nervous. The other thing is, all those people getting together, even though some of them are nice people and safe people, and some of them even work really hard at keeping people safe, which I actually do appreciate. So I should tell them, do not get eaten by the alligators. And the other thing though, can you hear them birds?
I hear them birds.
Oh man, birds make me happy as a jaybird. I like it. They're happy. See, I already feel better just going for a walk, even if I am in the tennis court. But here's the thing. Here is the thing. All them people, when they get excited and happy to be together and to get all connected and be friendly, do you know what they do? They take pictures. And here is my problem with that. Well, I don't want to talk about it right now. But some of our girls on the inside, including, well, really, that one we just got rescued. We just got her safe. We just got her up the attic, and Molly's helping her. But I don't want to do nothing that makes her feel unsafe. And one thing that makes her feel unsafe is pictures. And so we didn't do a video and just do a podcast. But if I have friends, I can't take my picture with them because it scared her, even if we got our clothes on, and even if now time is safe. I don't want her to get confused if there's bad people taking pictures, but these are good people taking pictures. But I think it seems too hard right now. And all that together feels like an awful lot to be trying to do in one day. I already saved our life from alligators. I don't want her to think picture taking is more alligators. Hey, they have a pretty good tennis net here. I wish we had the tennis and you can come play tennis with me. I would like that. It will feel good running around, bouncing some balls, and maybe I could hit a ball on a tennis racket, but
slow down.
I'm just walking. So it feels like a lot. Getting your picture taken kind of feels like being in a cage with the alligators on the outside. Why aren't the alligators on the inside? And also, I think I don't like being in a cage, even if it's a tennis court. So I know somebody who does not like being in cages. So I'm just gonna have to walk out of here, which means I can't talk no more because there's people over there. So I gotta turn this off and go finish my walk, and then maybe we can take a nap. And then we won't be such a cranky pants, even if there are alligators. So far, Orlando is not the happiest place on earth. And it is not being very nice. Not even letting you play at the lake, but I don't want to get chomped up by an alligator. Like some lady walking her dog who don't read the signs. I didn't read the signs, so I gotta get out of here. And that's what it feels like trying to make friends or trying to get your picture taken, or being in a tennis court that feels like a big old cage, because it feels like the same thing. If I know the signs and this don't feel good, and it gets confusing, even if you know now time is safe, because what if it's not? Her husband's not here and the therapist ain't here. But I think now time is still safe, maybe, but I think it's time for me to go back inside. I think I'm done walking for right now. Except also, I'm kind of stuck here because on one side I got alligators, and on the other 3 sides I got men's out there working. And I'm trying to say, in my head, I'm trying to think, now time is safe, except with alligators. And these men's are just workers. But now I'm in a big old cage with men's around me, and that don't feel good at all, and I think I got myself stuck. I feel a little bit trapped, and that was an accident, like the opposite of what I want to do, just come outside and play. I think we should not have left our room. I think I just want to go home. I think I just want to go home. We got our bear in our room. If I can get to our room, we got a bear in there.
Oh. I screwed it. I'm so sorry. I was just about to wrap up
Thank you for
stream.
joining us with System Speak, a podcast about dissociative identity disorder. You can listen to the podcast on Spotify, Google Play, and iTunes, or follow along on our website, www.systemspeak.org. Thanks for listening.
There's always Fooky, though. I was about to read Fooky. They want this vista to be buena. I love that part. They want that vista to be buena. I love John Mark. Please keep that man cage here. All these mans walking around. I like doing that accent. Sometimes I wonder if we have a headmate that has an accent, southern accent, because I feel like it's like the one accent that comes really naturally. But maybe it's just because it's the one we hear the most, and it doesn't mean anything, but it's fun to do. I want that vista to be buena. It's so fun to say. Oh, I'm stuck on happy, I think. Okay, there we go. Yeah, this was magenta and ruler being fancy. Let's see. Mark that as complete, and then I got 21 left to do. I had to put a pause on. A pause, not the animal kind of pause, but like the, the other kind of pause. On this redeem while I catch up. I'm hoping maybe in like 2 or 3 more drawing streams I'll be able to unpause that again. Oh, thank you, Fable. I love doodling. It's so fun. Relaxing. I'm putting my tablet away. Oh, I gotta put my glove away. Ah! Sorry for bringing around. Hopefully I'll finish that Nubia and Zoey comic off stream maybe tomorrow. I don't know. Soon. I'm so happy about Mouse. I think we'll put Mouse on our system card right away. Probably a few minutes after stream. Let me turn to face you. Hello. Thank you for coming to my stream. Let's see. My next stream will be next week. I am gonna start playing one shot. Now, I'll probably I do drawings like roughly every other week. Or every other stream, I mean. So yeah, I'll probably come back to more colorings in a couple weeks. Maybe actually color more of the Scream comics. Sorry I didn't get to that, but yeah. I got a lot of sketches we've made that I could color. Like a lot. But yeah. My next stream will be Wednesday night with Magma doing... Oh yeah, me. I'm playing one shot. You got one shot at that game, I think, so I gotta be careful. Wednesday night, Magma's doing a watch party of Half-Life VRAI, Act 4 commentary, and probably playing a little Madness Combat. And then Thursday night, Cuddle's playing more Heart Chain Kitty. Friday night, my girlfriend Q's playing more Splatoon 2. And Sunday night, Meadow's reading the rest of Magical Girl Raising Project Book 3. I'm gonna raid Fuki, who's playing Persona 5 Royal. Do you pronounce it Royal or Royale? I mean, I'm pretty sure both words are spelled the same. It just depends on the context, right? I think it's Royal. Yeah. No clue how to pronounce it. That's so funny. Who knows what game Fuki is playing right now? I guess none of us really know. Okay. Hello. I think Royal would be spelled with an E. Well, that's what I used to... Oh! Sorry, I was about to say that's what I used to think, but Super Animal Royale is spelled without the E, but then I just checked and it is. Okay. That makes sense. Okay. Okay. Have a wonderful day or night, wherever you at. Take care of yourself. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.